let's go. Come on. Battle Royale with cheese. Stick around. He had to split. He had to split. That's our man, Rooks G. Please go there after the stream. Please check out his tunes. Check out Cosmic Fraud. Coming up next is Cosmic Fraud. We're about to start in just a minute. He had to split. Captain Freedom.
Styles, can I ask you something? Do you really like working on Kane stuff?
You really like busting people?
Yeah. I bust frauds, I bust phonies. I love it.
Have you ever busted anyone you know?
Yeah, I tried it. Doesn't make any difference. See, in my business, you soon find out that everybody's capable of anything. Think of it, they've done it.
Doesn't leave you much to believe in.
Yeah, but think of the upside. It doesn't leave you too much to be disappointed in either. The sooner we're off the planet, the better.
Now you sound like Kane.
off the planet, the better.
In my business, you soon find out that anybody's capable of anything. You can think of it, they've done it.
Doesn't leave you much to believe in.
Yeah, but think of the upside. It doesn't leave you too much to be disappointed in either.
Covering the most dangerous game tonight. Tonight, you're in store, you're in luck.
Believe me, the sooner we're off the planet, the better.
Now you sound like Kane.
The sooner we're off the planet, the better. The sooner we're off the planet, the better. Right, yes, you are in luck. You're in luck. What happened to my video capture? Hold on. What? The sooner they're off the planet, the better. So yeah, tonight you're in luck. Hold on. Why is my video capture not working? Should be working. It's not working. It's only gonna work with that. Hold on a second. Hold on. Yo, what's up, you guys? Tonight. Oh boy. All right, well, looks like we're going to do it this way. I guess we'll do it this way. Yeah, we do it live. So tonight, we're covering the most dangerous game. This is the theme for tonight, the most dangerous game. And we, of course, Sabrina brings that up in the chat, and we're covering the most dangerous game, the short story by Richard Connell. I wonder why I froze here. Hold on, I froze over here. We're covering the most dangerous game by Richard Connell in 1924 and 1925, and that is a theme that we've talked about a lot recently. We brought it up so many times. I've covered this so many times in light of other streams that we've done, other works of literature, so many that I can't really name. But I thought that it would be good to cover the original short story tonight because. Why not go back to the source material, right? So tonight we'll be covering the most dangerous game, in depth, plus the Hunger Games. Where's my copy? Plus my copy of the Hunger Games right here. We'll also be going over the films, The Running Man, Battle Royale, and of course the Hunger Games, the film. So I think this one should be a good one. Hold on, let me fix my thing here because. This is, there we go. Okay, there we go. That should fix it. Hold on. Having a little bit of a tech problem here, guys. There we go. Are we good? That should be good. All right. Yo, that's OBS for you. Okay. So let's go ahead and dive into this because this is a short story by Richard Connell, 1924, 1925. He originally published this in Variety magazine. And it's a pretty short, it's a short story. This short story is a genre, so it would be, Heart of Darkness is a novella, a long short story, right? If it's sort of an oxymoron, but this one is about 18 pages, and it's so good. It's such a good story, and there's a lot to glean from this, especially because I realized when reading this that it's part of the basis for Max Zorin in A View to a Kill, right? Remember Christopher Walken? So please like and share the stream. Please help me. Please support me. Please see the links in there. And please give me a thumbs up and make sure that notification bell is on. So let's dive into it because first I'm going to go over the short story. Then I'm going to go over the novel, The Hunger Games, 2008 novel, then the 2012 film. And then I'll be covering the films Battle Royale and The Running Man. Stick around! No. He had to split. One of the great Arnie films, of course. And it's amazing how much there are actually similarities between this and Predator. And it's amazing that Arnie did this and Predator, right? And Commando was a few years before. But, the late 80s was a high time for films like this. And this short story is incredible because it's so relevant. It actually went into the public domain in 2020. And so let me just read a couple of notes here from the very beginning. So first of all, this is Monarch. There's Monarch symbolism in this. We'll get to the butterfly somewhere in the short story. Also, it deals with my own beginning of the novel, which is Monarch, right here, novel that I'm writing. And also, serial killers will take a cue from this. In fact, did you know that the Zodiac killer, quoted the short story, or rather was alluding to it when he said, when he was talking about the most dangerous game in one of his letters to the media. Robert Hansen, one of the serial killers. So the short story deals with a white Russian, and all right, we'll get to it. All right, let me dive into it. It's one thing that's important to bring up is that the Wasteland. Remember, we've covered the Wasteland, or at least a part of it. I need to go back to it, and then we've alluded to it many times. But the Wasteland was 1922. Great Gatsby, which we've covered, right, with our Jeff Stein Effrey stream, was 1925. And then The Sun Also Rises, which we've also done, was 1929. So the 1920s experienced this great burst of literary energy. And so the short story starts off. Off there to the right, I'm not going to read the whole short story. I'm just going to read the beginning here. Off there to the right somewhere is a large island, said Whitney. It's rather a mystery. What island is it? Rainsford asked. The old charts call it Ship Trap Island. Whitney replied, a suggestive name, isn't it? Sailors have a curious dread of the place. I don't know why, some superstition. Can't see it, remarked Rainsford, trying to peer through the dark tropical night that was palpable as it pressed its thick, warm blackness upon the yacht. You've good eyes, said Whitney with a laugh. And I've seen you pick off a moose moving in the brown full bush at 400 yards. But even you can't see 4 miles or so through a moonless Caribbean night. Not 4 yards, admitted Rainsford. It's like moist black velvet. Black velvet, a little smile. Black velvet, a lonely, lonely mile. A new one, down to your knees. Black velvet, if you please. That's the Chris Isaac version of Black Velvet. I'm taking my headphones off. So the short story is interesting because Rainsford begins the story. He's the protagonist, and he begins the story as he's with this guy Whitney. He's with his friend, and they're sailing. They're on their sailing yacht somewhere in the Caribbean. The Caribbean. Don't get mad at me. These people get mad when I say the Caribbean. The Caribs. The Caribbean. And he's a big game hunter. And one thing that's interesting here is that he remarks, he sort of changes roles in this. And one thing that he says at the beginning, he says, the best sport in the world for the hunter, amended Whitney, not for the jaguar, for the jaguar. Don't talk rot, Whitney, said Rainsford. You're a big game hunter, not a philosopher. Who cares how a jaguar feels? Perhaps the jaguar does, observed Whitney. Bah, they have no understanding. Even so, I rather think they understand one thing, fear. The fear of pain and fear of death. Nonsense, laughed Rainsford. This hot weather's making you soft, Whitney. Be a realist. The world is made up of 2 classes, the hunters and the huntees. I wonder why he doesn't say the hunted. The hunted. Luckily, you and I are hunters. Do you think you've passed that mark yet? So look, one thing that happens here is, are we a little low? One thing that happens here is, tell me if I'm a little low. I should be up a little bit more. There we go. That should be a little bit better. So one thing that happens here is Rainsford changes roles within the short story. He goes from talking about how the animal feels nothing, it doesn't matter because they're a big game, to being the hunted animal in the short story, to really understanding that fear is the driving force of the thing that keeps him alive once he starts to be hunted. Now, there are so just to start off here, there are so many films that deal with this. One thing that we're not covering tonight is Surviving the Game. Ice-T's great Surviving the Game with Gary Busey and John C. McGinley. I saw that in the cinema with my friend. I think it came out in 1992. And then there are so many. There's I got a whole list of them in here. Ready or Not. Ready or Not was a great film that came out a few years ago. And there's a bunch of them. Basically, one of the major themes in films right now, I think, we've got Gnosticism. Gnosticism always drives film. It seems to be a constant current through film. through the Hollywood industry, especially now. And then we've got the Most Dangerous Game theme. We've got the cannibalism theme. But Most Dangerous Game has really come out. Remember there was that other film a few years ago where there's the game. Yeah, Bourgeois Beatnik brings up there's the game by David Fincher, right, which is another variation of the Most Dangerous Game. Michael Douglas game. I'm gay actor Michael Douglas and Sean Penn. That's a really good film, David Fincher. But one of the themes of this, or one of the motifs, is that the hunted man will change. The hunter will become the hunted, right? And in this, he truly is met by one of the elites of the elites. And this is early 20th century. And you'll find that at the end of the short story, one of the things that Zaroff is going to talk about, Zaroff, it's always a Z, right? It's always a Z, right? As if he's the Omega, he's at the pinnacle. And we get this with Max Zorn, right? We get this with Anton Xander LaVey, and then we get the Xander character in Eyes Wide Shut. And actually, we're going to find that Zaroff is really a LaVeyan. He's like a Nietzschean LaVeyan in one of his brief monologues towards the end of the short story. But what happens here is these two guys are sailing on a yacht, and they're big game hunters, early 20th century, 1920s. And he hears Rainsford, Whitney will retire to his cabin, I suppose, and Rainsford will hear a shot crack off in the distance on the island, and it's called Ship Trap Island. Now, there's a reason for that we're going to find out. But when he hears this shot, he knows that, he knows the report from a shot, from personal experience. That's what he thrives on. And so he stands up on one of the railings, and he tries to see if he can tell where it's coming from on the island, because they're close enough to the island. His pipe will hit something on the ship, and then he'll lose it. And then as he's trying to reach for it, he falls overboard into the water. And he takes this sort of black baptism, right? A baptism into the black waters of surrounding Ship Trap Island, and then will swim for ages until he finally ends up on the shore, where he realizes if the water had been a little bit choppier, then he would have died. But they mentioned cannibals at the beginning. He says, cannibals, suggested Rainsford. Hardly. Even cannibals wouldn't live in such a godforsaken place, but it's gotten into sailor lore somehow. Didn't you notice that the crew's nerves seemed a bit jumpy today? Yes, even that tough-minded old Swede who'd go up to the devil himself and ask him for a light. Those fishy blue eyes held a look I never saw before. All I could get out of him was, the place has an evil name among seafaring men, sir. Then he said to me very gravely, don't you feel anything, as if the air about us was actually poisonous. Now, you mustn't laugh when I tell you that I did feel something like a sudden chill. Now, of course, the island is going to be an important, motif in The Most Dangerous Game. Think of Jeff Stein, Every Island. Think of the island, even the film The Island, which is Logan's Run-esque island, but also the island in the Hunger Games, remember, as we'll get to later, the Hunger Games actually takes place in a synthetic world, a kind of synthetic dome, which in a sense is an island. I mean, they could have made the synthetic world an island itself. Remember, they talk about in the book, they talk about this could be snow, it could be Arctic, it could be tropical, it could be desert. But it is by itself. It's even away from Pan Am. Also, Battle Royale takes place on an island. Let's see. They also used this motif. I wrote of the old Swede, who is one of the crew members. Remember, they used this in King Kong and the King Kong reboot, and even in the movie Benjamin Button. There's like an old. There's a battle-hardened Swede, and actually Sven Thorson is gonna. I don't know if he's Swedish. I'm sure he is, but is gonna show up in. He's one of the actors in The Running Man. He's actually the guard. He's actually Dawson's guard. But needless to say, that sort of gives us that motif. And then it says, don't you feel anything as if the air was actually poisonous? It's as if this place is some sort of other world. It's an other. It's apart from civilization.
And we're going to learn that Zaroff has made it that way purposefully. But I also think of the character, the character named Lucifer in the last Bond movie, Rami Malek's character, who is creating this neo-Gnostic garden. And it's almost as if the very air is poisonous, right? There was no breeze. The sea was as flat as a plate glass window. We were drawing near the island then when I felt a mental chill, a sort of sudden dread, he says. And then he says, maybe, but sometimes I think sailors have an extra sense that tells them when they're in danger. Sometimes I think evil is a tangible thing with a wavelength, just as sound and light have. Pretty interesting for a 1920s text. An evil place can, so to speak, broadcast vibrations of evil. Anyhow, I'm glad we're getting out of this zone. Well, I think I'll turn in now, Rainsford. It says Whitney. Now, Whitney is a kind of guide to this place, even though he disappears and he doesn't appear again in the short story. But it's interesting that they talk about multi-dimensional frequencies and vibrations emanating from the island, and it makes me think of Montauk. Now, Montauk is on the island, of course. It's on Long Island. But it's at the end of the island, but it's almost an island unto itself. Remember the Montauk experiments and what we think of when we think of Stranger Things. But it exists as a kind of island because even now you can ride up to Montauk and to the Montauk base and look at the old radar tower. But you still can't get close to the actual base. People say that there are still vibrational frequencies emanating from below as if the base is still active. Who knows? But suffice it to say that this, exists. Obviously, this was published pre-CIA, right? This is post World War I. World War I is going to play a part in the way that Rainsford survives in this. But it's as if this is another text that is a template for these elites running these things, right? We've talked about, we've of course done Catcher in the Rye. We've discussed bits of Alice in Wonderland, and then we'll be doing Peter Pan soon with Jamie. But all of these are such weird texts, especially this one. It's almost as if there's an underlying subtext in a language by itself that provides some sort of programming language. I mean, it is very strange. That's apart from even the literal and the figurative, or the surface and the subtext of the short story itself. It's as if there's a subtext to this, if you know what I'm saying. So he experiences a sensuous drowsiness of the night. There's a constant motif in this of blackness, darkness, the darkness of night, the opaque waters. And that's going to be mirrored in Zaroff's eyes. We're going to see when we meet Zaroff that he has the black eyes of the elite. He hears a cry. The cry was pinched off short as the blood-warm waters of the Caribbean Sea dosed over his. He says dosed over his head as if he's taking a dose or a dram of opiates. He will later talk about opiated sleep, which is kind of a holdover from Poe's language. The third page of the short story. He says he heard this cry. He heard a cry out as if it's an animal, but the way that human beings are conflated with animals in this is interesting, because at the beginning of this, Rainsford makes a clear distinction between humans and animals, but then he becomes the hunted animal, which then sort of fuses into the hunted human being when it transcends into the fact that Zaroff cannot get any sort of thrill, Dorian Gray style. There's no more thrills that he can, he has no more feelings. He's a complete psychopath. He has no more feelings, and so he has to hunt human beings. And what we're going to find is that he wants a worthy adversary, and he starts off by doing the taxi driver thing of one day a real rain's going to come and wash the scum off the streets. But then he's going to find his worthy adversary in Rainsford himself, and it's going to be one-on-one. Of course, they're both going to use sort of little tricks in their hunting process. He says the lights of the yacht became faint and ever-vanishing fireflies. So the yacht disappears into the distance as he floats down the black waters towards the island. And then he says, it came out of the darkness, a high screaming sound, the sound of an animal in an extremity of anguish and terror. It's going to be a human being. Pistol shot is what he hears, and that's, of course, going to be the coup de grace. Now, what's interesting is that already on page 3, Rainsford is talking about a high screaming sound, the sound of an animal in an extremity of anguish and terror, but he only does that after he falls into the water. And he had just said at the beginning of the text, don't talk rot. You're a big game hunter, not a philosopher. Who cares what a jaguar feels? And they've no understanding. So if they have no understanding, then how would they be in anguish and terror? So he's already begun to change from how he was 2 pages ago. The short story is a difficult genre to accomplish for an artist because you have the long form of the novel sort of truncated into this small thing. You have to synthesize all of the data and then later all of the ideas that you're trying to convey in a small amount of real estate, of literary real estate on the page. He says. He gets to the island. Jagged crags appeared to jut into the opaqueness. He forced himself upward, hand over hand, gasping, his hands raw. He reached a flat place at the top. Dense jungle came down to the very edge of the cliffs. What perils that tangle of trees and underbrush might hold for him did not concern Rainsford just then. All he knew was that he was safe from his enemy, the sea, and that utter weariness was on him. He flung himself down at the jungle edge and tumbled headlong into the deepest sleep of his life. Now, again, this is interesting because this will provide a motif for all of the other works that we're going to read tonight. This happens with actually with all the other works, right? It happens in Battle Royale. It happens in Hunger Games especially, and then a little bit in The Running Man, where the character, after immediately falling through the looking glass, right, will try to escape, or will try to save them. Will try to save themselves and escape from the immediate danger, and then will be so overwhelmed that they'll fall asleep. And in fact, Rainsford will do something that Suzanne Collins is later going to take in the Hunger Games, which is he will climb up into a tree and tie himself to the tree so that he doesn't fall over. Hold on, got a little bit of ash on my paper there. He says, what kind of men, he wondered, in so forbidding a place, an unbroken front of snarled and ragged jungle fringed the shore. So now we are completely engulfed in darkness and the jungle, and this is a new world. In fact, it's kind of a primordial world. It's an old world where Rainsford should feel comfortable as a big game hunter, but he's separate from everyone else, and now he's alone, and he's plunging into also the old world of the elite playground, which is going to be Zaroff's constructed synthetic playground. He's made this island himself. He's created the way that it traps people. So it's not quite natural and primordial. It's just a new world in how he wants it. Of course, right? This is the MO of the elites. This is sort of neo-Gnostic and post-Depop, a playground for them to hunt. And this also occurs, you remember this also occurs in, I wrote, The Fugitive, because The Fugitive, give me back my family. Where's my family? Give me back my family. The Fugitive also does this, right, where Richard Kimball, Harrison Ford, will escape into the wilderness and will, remember, after he falls from the great height at the waterfall, I don't care, says Tommy Lee Jones. I didn't kill my family. I didn't kill my wife. I don't care. He jumps right into the chasm, into the waterfall abyss, into the water, floats downstream, gets away, and then hides himself in the leaves and falls asleep. So this is a constant motif. Page 4 of the short story, he says, bleak darkness was blacking out the sea and jungle when Rainsford sighted the lights. As he forced himself, he saw to his great astonishment that the lights were in one enormous building, a lofty structure with pointed towers plunging upward into the gloom. Plunging upward. That's an interesting oxymoron, isn't it? Oxymoron twice in one thing. Yo, there's Nick. There's TGF. What's up, TGF? Green Feathers. Good to see you, homeboy. Everybody give a shout out to TGF there. Because he's plunging, the world is inverted now. It's plunging upwards. And the spires of this castle it reminds me of like the Sleeping Beauty castle, or more appropriately the like the Dutroux castle, right? Which is another example of IRL most dangerous game. A lofty structure with pointed towers plunging upward in the gloom. His eyes made out the shadowy outlines of the palatial chateau. It was set on a high bluff, and on three sides of it, cliffs dived down to where the sea licked greedy lips in the shadows. Interesting that the very sea seems to be licking and lapping up people that we're later going to find are struck there because it's called Ship Trap Island. So they purposefully are misdirected against the bluffs and against the cliffs, and then they crash, and then they become the prey for Zaroff. He says, mirage, thought Rainsford, but it was no mirage. He found when he opened the tall spiked iron gate. This is also very Poe. It's Poe-esque, right? The stone steps, it's like the House of Usher. The stone steps were real enough. The massive door with a leering gargoyle for a knocker was real enough. Yet above it all, lifting, above it all hung an air of unreality. I can't see because of my notes. Above it all hung an air of unreality. As if it's also a Caso D. I have crossed oceans of time to find you. D. Dragoi! Stragoi! He lifted the knocker and it creaked up stiffly as if it had never been used. He let it fall and it startled him with its booming loudness. He thought he heard steps within. The door remained closed. Again, Rainsford lifted the heavy knocker and let it fall. In the river of glaring gold light that poured out, the first thing Rainsford's eyes discerned was, a good verb there, discerned was the largest man Rainsford had ever seen, a gigantic creature, solidly made and black-bearded to the waist. In his hand, the man held a long-barreled revolver, and he was pointing it straight at Rainsford's heart. Rainsford says, don't be alarmed, because he's used to being the hunter. And now he finds that he's met this gigantic ogre character, right? This, who's almost, in this instance, appears to be, as we don't know yet what's happening because we're reading this in real time, so he appears to be a kind of Svengali character in his Shangri-La, or almost a Kurtz or a Judge Holden, right? Both of whom make their sort of palatial residence as if they're human gods in the middle of the jungle. Apocalypse Now takes a lot from this, and so does Heart of Darkness. I mean, or rather, this takes from Heart of Darkness. What year was Heart of Darkness published? Hold on. Let's find that. Hold on a second. Heart of Darkness. Let's find what year this was published. 1899. Okay. So this is prior to, Heart of Darkness is prior to this, right? By 25 years, quarter of a century. He says, don't be alarmed. The menacing look in the eyes did not change. The revolver pointed as rigidly as if the giant were a statue, and he gave no sign that he understood Rainsford's words. We're going to see that this character is deaf and dumb. He is a kind of Igor for Zaroff. He's got a black uniform trimmed with gray astrakhan. I'm Sanger Rainsford of New York, Rainsford began again. I fell off a yacht and I'm hungry. The man's only answer was to raise his thumb, with his thumb the hammer of the revolver. Another man was coming down the broad marble steps, an erect, slender man in evening clothes. He advanced to Rainsford and held out his hand. It is a very great pleasure and honor to welcome Mr. Sanger Rainsford, the celebrated hunter, to my home. Sanger, because sang, like blood, like he's real, like he's a human being here. I've read your book about hunting snow leopards in Tibet, you see, explained the man. I am General Zaroff. Rainsford's first impression was that the man was singularly handsome. His second was that there was an original, almost bizarre quality about the general's face. He was a tall man, past middle age, for his hair was vivid white. You see the Max Zorin View to a Kill, Christopher Walken kind of correlation here. But his thick eyebrows and pointed military mustache were as black as the night from which Rainsford had come. Again, the blackness of night. He had high cheekbones, a sharp-cut nose, a spare, dark face, the face of a man used to giving orders, the face of an aristocrat. Turning to the giant in uniform, the general made a sign, and the giant put away his pistol, saluted, and withdrew. And then he says, is he a Russian? He's a Cossack, said the general. He's Igor is a Cossack. And the smile showed red lips and pointed teeth. So am I. So, again, you can't help but see that Zaroff, he's a general. He's a literal aristocrat. He's an elite. He has the aristocratic face, the high cheekbones, the shock of white hair with the black bushy eyebrows, which is a kind of a weird juxtaposition in terms of the way his face looks. He's got black eyes, the dark black eyes of the elite, almost vampirical cannibal. And one thing in this is that they mentioned cannibalism at the beginning, but I tend to think that, just reading into it, what does Zaroff do? What if he is a Dorian Gray character? Remember we did our analysis of Dorian Gray? And if he's a Dorian Gray character, because Dorian Gray does this in the book, right? He tries to experience absolute pleasure. He's a slave to his base passions, and he goes through everything. He goes through sex, and then drugs, and then war, and then murder. And eventually this leads us to Bram Stoker's Dracula, which we also did an analysis of, and this the possession and ownership of the life force of another human, which it seems that would be the natural extension of what Zaroff is doing on this island, right? That he's not just hunting human beings, but he's possessing them. I mean, this also goes with the MO of, think of Papa Doc and sort of Carib and voodoo culture in the Caribbean and in South America. So it seems to be that's what he would do. And this guy's in exile. He's also from the war. He's used to giving orders. This guy absolutely dominates. But now he's on this private island where he's built this chateau in the wilderness. So it's a kind of hell. Do you get it? His chateau is essentially like the palace in the city of Dis, because of the inversion that we talked about, the plunging upwards, the darkness, the swimming through the chasm, through the across the abyss that Rainsford has experienced. And now he's in a kind of hell where he's greeted by a charming character who's eventually going to possess him. And they are out of the light of grace, it seems, right? By choice, at least in Zaroff's case. It says, Zaroff is charming. He says, I've read your book, just like Kurtz is reading, Jesse Weston, right, from Ritual to Romance. And he's reading J.G. Frazier. He's reading The Golden Bough. And he's read this hunting book, of course. And he's going to offer him some new clothes because he's, gone through this experience in the wild. And he's going to offer him new clothes. And he's going to try and invite him to be part of his thing, right? And he says the clothes are from a London tailor who ordinarily cut and sewed for none below the rank of Duke. So it's a Savile Row tailor, or even more private. He says, let's see. The dining room to which Ivan conducted him was in many ways remarkable. There was a medieval magnificence, I love the alliteration, about it. It suggested a baronial hall of feudal times with its oaken panels, its high ceiling, its vast refectory tables, where 200 men could sit down to eat. Like, this guy is a complete lord of the manor, right? This is his fiefdom. They were eating borscht, the rich red soup with whipped cream so dear to Russian palates. Half apologetically, General Zaroff said, man, some borscht sounds real good right now. You guys, please support me. Please send in some super chats because I would love to go get some borscht right now or some dollar menu. Please support me. I could really use your support. Support the channel. We do our best to preserve the amenities of civilization here. Please forgive any lapses. We are well off the beaten track. Do you think the champagne has suffered from its long ocean trip? This is also something that Moreau is going to do in The Island of Dr. Moreau. And which is to try to continue civilization in the midst of the darkness, right? In the midst of, hold on, let me get rid of And like in the midst of the darkness, in the midst of the uncivilized atmosphere of the jungle and the primordial jungle, and these guys always, this is a constant motif in movies, they always do their best to do this, right? To continue civilization, to complete their aristocracy. Now, they're going to talk about the most dangerous game. They're going to bring up the title. Hey, there's the title. They're going to bring up the title. And what they say here is, Rainsford will say, I always thought that Cape Buffalo is the most dangerous of all big game. For the moment, the general did not reply. He was smiling his curious red lip smile. Then he said slowly, no, you are wrong, sir. The Cape Buffalo is not the most dangerous big game. I hunt more dangerous game. Is there a big game on this island? The biggest. Really? Oh, it isn't here naturally, of course. I have to stock the island. And we know from the dramatic irony what this is going to be. What'd she say? Oh, Kira will know. Kira said, thank you for not pronouncing it borscht. It doesn't have a T. Okay, so did I do it right, Kira? Kira will know. The general smiled. Hunting tigers ceased to interest me some years ago. I exhausted their possibilities. No thrill left in tigers, no real danger. I live for danger, Mr. Rainsford. The general took from his pocket a gold cigarette case and offered his guest a long black cigarette with a silver tip. It was perfumed and it gave off a smell like incense. This is probably not a nod to the Edwardian cigarettes of the Picture of Dorian Gray, but it is certainly the same thing that's used in the book. I mean, this is a nod to the decadence of the fin de siècle, right? Of the late Victorian era into the Edwardian era. And it's what's amazing is that Zaroff exists in this time period, but he's also absolutely modern, which we're going to get in a second. I'm going to show you his modernism speech. He's absolutely modern, but he's also a baronial throwback from the feudal era. And remember in Dorian Gray, he smokes, and Oscar Wilde smoked these, the opium tipped cigarette and the gold tipped cigarette filled with opium. Absolute decadence in Dorian Gray. Yeah, he smokes a gold cigarette. He's got a gold, long black cigarette with a silver tip. It was perfumed and gave off a smell like incense. Now, this is going to be important in the short story because that's how we're going to identify Zaroff when he's hunting Rainsford. And so it seems if this were a weaker short story, that would be a small detail thrown in just for sort of exposition. But it's not. It's actually something that's going to play a role in the plot because that's how we're going to identify Zaroff. And it also shows that his perfume, his odor, his aroma is a choice of hubris because it's like he's such a good hunter. He lives, he has almost an uncanny skill for hunting, and yet he gives himself away with this hubristic choice with his perfumed cigarettes. He says, the general filled both glasses. He says, I'll tell you, you'll be amused. I know. I think I may say in all modesty, I've done a rare thing. I've invented a new sensation. May I pour you another glass of port? Right. This is an in excess new sensation. God makes some men poets. Some he makes kings, some beggars. Me, he made a hunter. My hand was made for the trigger, my father said. He was a very rich man with 250,000 acres in the Crimea, and he was an ardent sportsman. It's like this whole cradle in that country in the east, right? And we refer to it by Crimea here. That whole region is his own personal fiefdom, right? And also one thing that's interesting in terms of the form of this short story is that the character will capitalize the pronouns of God, he, and that will show that Zaroff does in almost a true satanic spirit. He understands and respects God and the deity of the Lord, and yet he chooses in his sort of satanic spirit to invert everything in God's creation. He says, He says, when I was only 5 years old, he gave me a little gun specially made in Moscow for me to shoot sparrows with. When I shot some of the prize turkeys with it, he did not punish me. He complimented me on my marksmanship. I killed my first bear in the Caucasus when I was 10. My whole life has been one prolonged hunt. I went into the army. It was expected of noblemen's sons, and for a time commanded a division of Cossack cavalry. But my real interest was always the hunt. I've hunted every kind of game in every land. It would be impossible for me to tell you how many animals I've killed. Just like Kurtz in Apocalypse Now, right? It's impossible for words to describe. It's impossible for words to describe what horror means. Horror. Horror. Horror has a face and a name. The general puffed at his cigarette. After the debacle in Russia, I left the country. It's crazy how relevant this is, right? Isn't this crazy? This is like almost exactly 100 years ago. After the debacle in Russia, I left the country, for it was imprudent for an officer of the Tsar to stay there. Many noble Russians lost everything. I luckily had invested heavily in American securities. So he's tied in with the Fed. So I shall never have to open a tea room in Monte Carlo or drive a taxi in Paris. Naturally, I continued to hunt grizzlies in your Rockies. I hunt grizzlies in your Rockies. Crocodiles in the Ganges, rhinoceroses in East Africa. It was in Africa that the Cape Buffalo hit me and laid me up for 6 months. As soon as I recovered, I started for the Amazon to hunt jaguars. For I'd heard they were unusually cunning. They weren't, the Cossack side. Interesting. I like the variation there in terms of the sentence length. And that's a surprise. That's a surprise sentence. Well, he's talking about the revolution, right? He's talking about the Soviet revolution, the red revolution. They were no match at all for a hunter with his wits about him and a high-powered rifle. I was bitterly disappointed. I was lying in my tent with a splitting headache one night with a terrible thought. Pushed its way into my mind. Hunting was beginning to bore me. He says, the general smiled. I had no wish to go to pieces. I must do something. Now, this brings in something interesting in terms of the theme of this text, which is the contrast between what he says here and versus how he portrays other people, other animals. He's referring to animals, but then he starts to refer to people as this way because people become his prey. He says, now mine is an analytical mind, Mr. Rainsford. Doubt that is why I enjoy the problems of the chase. No doubt, General Zaroff. So Rainsford agrees with him here. So I asked myself why the hunt no longer fascinated me. You're much younger than I am, Mr. Rainsford, and have not hunted as much, but perhaps can guess the answer. What was it? Simply this. Hunting had ceased to be what you call a sporting proposition. It become too easy. I always got my quarry. Always. There is no greater bore than perfection. Interesting. Don't you see a sort of inkling of Satanism here? Also, it reminds me of Morrissey's You Are the Quarry. Have you guys heard that album? We talked about it when I did the Smith stream. He's got that song, Irish Blood, English Heart, What I'm Made For. Also, he says, no animal had a chance with me anymore. That is no boast. It's a mathematical certainty. The animal has nothing but his legs and his instinct. Instinct is no match for reason. When I thought of this, it was a tragic moment for me, I can tell you. So I wrote CF Hunger Games. These themed works seem to want to reduce the characters to instinct until their use of it, until they I can't even read my own writing here over the notes. These two works seem to want to reduce the characters to instinct until they somehow blend instinct and reason, and this allows them to outwit their antagonist. So it's not just instinct and reason, it's the synthesis of the two in these works where the protagonist always seems to master this, and that allows them to overcome the antagonist. So this occurs with Katniss and Cato later on in the Hunger Games. They also make a point of talking about this briefly in The Running Man and then also in Battle Royale. He says he had to invent a new animal to hunt. The answer was, of course, it must have courage, cunning, and above all, it must be able to reason. Right. So that's why he starts hunting human beings. But then he says, the general says, Rainsford tells him straight off, he says, this is not hunting, this is murder. And the general laughed with an entire good nature. This is an important part in the text. He regarded Rainsford quizzically. I refuse to believe that okay. So this is the part of the text where he is going to give his speech on modernity and what modernity means to him and to the elites. And the reason that I'm reading this and going through this, so kind of deliberately, is that this is a perfect prerequisite for not only the other works that we're going to cover, but also the theme of The Most Dangerous Game, which plays its part in real life now, right? This is revelatory for now. So he says, the general laughed with an entire good nature. He regarded Rainsford quizzically. I refuse to believe that so modern and civilized a young man as you seem to be, harbors romantic ideas about the value of human life. Surely your experiences in the war, he stopped, did not make me condone cold-blooded murder, finished Rainsford stiffly. So what's great about this is that Rainsford gives him pushback, even though he is essentially in this hellscape and he's surrounded by this, the trappings of this most dangerous game. He knows where this is leading. And he knew where it was leading, and then it leads up to this. But he gives pushback. He debates him, essentially, right? He says, no, this is cold-blooded murder. What you're doing is not right. I love how he tells him that. He says, how extraordinarily droll you are. One does not expect nowadays, I'm going to give him an English accent here. One does not expect nowadays to find a young man of the educated class, even in America, with such naive, and if I may say so, mid-Victorian point of view. It's like finding a snuff box in a limousine. Ah, well, doubtless you had Puritan ancestors. So many Americans appear to have had. I'll wager you forget your notions when you go hunting with me. You've a genuine new thrill in store for you, Mr. Rainsford. So, in other words, this is interesting. Here's my note. Experiences in the war devalued human life for Zaroff, or at least we assume that this will be the case. This is the broken, fragmented landscape of post-World War I literature and life, but it's transferred to the overgrown jungle canopy of the uncivilized countries. So instead of it being the wasteland of the cityscape, which we usually we see that in modernism, and then this is kind of a cue for the post. It's kind of a pre-postmodernism, if that makes sense. But that's what modernity is, right? This is prior to the atomic bomb, but this is post World War I, broken, fragmented landscape of the wasteland. But now we're transferred to something utterly new, which is the overgrown jungle, right, of the kind of private client state, which is taken over in baronial fashion by this Duke of Darkness. And this is where the elites live in exile, right? This is the Dutroux affair. This is Jeff Stein McEffrey Island. We always get these islands, these places where these people live and they retreat. And it also reminds me of the French plantation scene in Apocalypse Now, but of course that's a holdover from colonialism. So that's slightly different because now they're reaping what they've sown, and they're surrounded by all the events of the 19th century, and now they're railing back. This is sort of an inversion of that. This is different. He's taken over and there's no one else around. He's using them as prey. But he goes on to say, life is for the strong to be lived by the strong, and if needs be, taken by the strong. The weak of the world were put here to give the strong pleasure. I am strong. Why should I not use my gift? If I wish to hunt, why should I not hunt? I hunt the scum of the earth, sailors from tramp ships, lascars, blacks, Chinese, whites, mongrels, a thoroughbred horse or hound is worth more than a score of them. But they are men, says Rainsford hotly. Precisely, said the general. That is why I use them. It gives me pleasure. They can reason after a fashion, so they are dangerous. So, do you get what he's done here? It's a sort of a contradiction, because what he said is that he hunts the scum of the earth, and he thinks of them as animals, and yet he knows that they possess reason, which makes them men. So there's the distinction fades with him. And what we see here is a kind of, in a way, this kind of reminds me of Bill Hartford in Eyes Wide Shut, because remember that Bill Hartford thinks that he's at the top of society, right? He's this society doctor. He's he lives in this gigantic, apartment in New York overlooking the park, and he goes to these parties, but then he learns that, he is being gaslit and gang stalked to be used by the actual elites who are higher up. And then there's a higher up and a higher up. But this guy is actually higher up. This guy is higher than he is. And he thinks that he's at the top because he's a big game hunter and he's on this yacht and he's sailing and he's hunted everything. And he thinks that he's above, he knows that he's above the animal kingdom. But what's interesting is that he then, through the process of this, he learns what fear and terror mean, even though Rainsford is also a World War I vet, which is interesting. So one thing that happens here when Zaroff talks about the mid-Victorian point of view is that we have a distinction amongst what we think would be the same sort of class, which is the aristocratic upper class. That's how Rainsford is able to identify them. Both fighting in the war. But we learn that Zaroff is of a whole other class. And part of that is the exile in which he finds himself. He's also exotic, right? He's a white Russian. He's exotic, and he's been all over the world. And so has Rainsford, but not in the same way. And one thing that we get here that's interesting is that the Victorian morals and mores will actually support Rainsford in his understanding and slight debate, telling Zaroff that these are men, regardless of what you think of them, they're men, and this is wrong. So he has a moral grounding and structure, at least he seems to right here, right? Zaroff explains this island is called Ship Trap. Sometimes an angry god of the high seas sends them to me. An angry god of the high seas. And he lowercase is the god as if it's a pagan god right here, whereas he was capitalizing God earlier. But now he's starting to think of himself as a kind of a god here on this, a god of his own island. Sometimes when Providence is not so kind, I help Providence a bit. Come to the window with me. Rainsford went to the window and looked out toward the sea. Watch out there. He shows him electric lights, 1920s. He shows him electric lights. He says they indicate a channel where there's none. Giant rocks with razor edges crouch like a sea monster with wide open jaws. They can crush a ship as easily as I crush this nut. He dropped a walnut on the hard floor. Oh, we get a little bit of $65,000 you-know-what here. He dropped a walnut on the hard floor and brought his heel grinding down on it. Oh, yes, I have electricity. We try to be civilized here. Civilized, and you shoot down men? A trace of anger was in the general's black eyes, but it was there for a second. He says, I assure you, I do not do the thing you suggest. That would be barbarous. I treat these visitors with every consideration. They get plenty of good food and exercise. They get in a splendid physical condition. You shall see for yourself. We'll visit my training school. So he's got to enter the dragon game of death. Bruce Lee training school, right? More examples of that. And this is interesting because this is also going to occur slightly in Battle Royale, not really, but it definitely occurs in the Hunger Games. Remember, they go to their training school before they fight. And I have something interesting. I have an interesting take on that, a hot take on that when we get to it. He says, a very inferior lot, I regret to say, poor specimens and more accustomed to the deck than to jungle. And they're looking at human beings out there, and he's saying these are the people that are training because I'm going to hunt them. Also, my last note on that other page says modernity. The modernity that Zaroff expresses is one that is, this is kind of the essence of modernity in terms of literature and the elites, which is utterly liberated from conventional morality and even the British colonial mores. And this liberation is Luciferian. It's a liberation to do what thou wilt and finally to take life. It's satanic. So do you notice that when he talks about life is for the strong, to be lived by the strong, and if needs be taken by the strong, that's pure Levian, right? It's essentially, this is a kind of Crowleyan, Levian, Nietzschean Satanism, not expressed in those words, but in terms of its essence. And he even makes his island out to be a death trap in itself, right? Where he then takes the people in to fatten them up before he kills them. That's why there's the pig scene in The Hunger Games later. So he says, you'll visit my training school, and then we'll go hunting, and you'll be with me. And the smile, he says, Rainsford is going to say, yeah, but he says, what if you've lost? What if you lose, right? What if you lose one of your games? And he says, to date, I have not lost. I don't wish you to think me a braggart, Mr. Rainsford. Many of them afford only the most elementary sort of problem. Occasionally, I strike a tartar. One almost did win. I eventually had to use the dogs. The dogs, right? The dogs of doom. The No Quarter Led Zeppelin Dogs of Doom. The dogs of doom are howling low. And the hounds of, to them, these are probably the Kate Bush hounds of love that I just discussed with Rachel, Based Homeschool Mama, on her channel. And that stream did pretty well. You guys, please make sure you go back also after this and check back out, go back and check out that Paul Thomas Anderson stream. I thought that was a good stream. You know, it was a good stream on the masterclass of Paul Thomas Anderson and his films. The general steered Rainsford to a window. Hopefully you guys are liking the stream. You know, please like and share the stream. I also like doing this because I picture myself in terms of what I would want. Look, I've had many days of driving, you know, for instance, driving to see my family in Mississippi, right? And it's a 16-hour drive, and I'm driving through the darkness, and I want something to listen to. Usually when I'm, if you're lucky when you're on those drives, then, you know, you get, you know, a JD, a live stream will be up, right? And I've spent many days just driving, listening to endless Bursch and Royce streams. But, you know, you're driving out in the darkness, and, you know, you especially at our age, we want to hear people talk. And so hopefully somebody's out there listening to this in the darkness. And it's somewhat interesting because I think this is interesting because of the content material, right? I mean, this is now, and this is like the template for so much literature and so many films now. This is it right here. It also is a total Depop, you know, George Bernard Shaw stuff that we're reading here, but in literary form. I mean, Bernard Shaw is a Nobel Prize winner in literary form. Yes, it's the same. But this is in terms of a short story, in terms of a narrative. And I think it's interesting when this stuff is put into art because, again, we get a lot of truth that we don't get, you know, from art that we don't get from fiction. Yes, fiction is, you know, truth is stranger than fiction, right? But fiction, I'm sorry if I'm not making sense, but fiction will give us truth that sometimes the realistic or the data facts don't, because we're able to put it in terms of our own worldview or into our own mind, see ourselves in the story. You know, it's a parable. These function as parables in a way. It's a dark parable. The lights from the window sent a flickering illumination that made grotesque patterns on the courtyard below, and Rainsford could see moving about there a dozen or so huge black shapes. As they turned toward him, their eyes glittered greenly. So many times we've seen the glittering green that represents the evil in these cases. I mean, we saw the emerald green glowing in terms of the vaporous fog in Bram Stoker's Dracula in the book and in the film. We also saw green in American Psycho. We've seen this so many times. He says, a rather good lot, I think. They are let out at 7 7 every night. These are his dogs, these hounds. If anyone should try to get into my house or out of it, something extremely regrettable would occur to him. And then he hummed a snatch of song from the a popular song, the Folie Belge. And now I want to show you my new collection of heads. Will you come with me to the library? Now you know the heads he's going to show him. They don't show this in the text, but we can read into this and see that this is probably going to be a collection of actual human heads rather than the trophies of the animals that he's hunted in his big game room. Rainsford says, no, I'm going to go to bed. I don't want to see them. And he says, we'll hunt tomorrow, will we? And he leads him up to his bed. Rainsford could not quiet his brain with the opiate of sleep. He went to the window and looked out. His room was high up in one of the towers. He's in the dark tower here. The lights of the chateau were out, and it was dark and silent, but there was a fragment of sallow moon, and by its wan light, he could see dimly the courtyard. There, weaving in and out of the pattern of shadow, were black, noiseless forms. The hounds heard him at the window and looked up expectantly with their green eyes. Rainsford went back to the bed and lay down. By many methods, he tried to put himself to sleep and achieved a doze when, just as morning began to come, he heard far off in the jungle the faint report of a pistol. So that's Zaroff out there hunting human beings. And then Zaroff, this is where the Max Zorin thing really occurs pretty strong. General Zaroff did not appear until luncheon because he's out hunting all night, right? He's a creature. He's, do you hear them? The children of the night. What music they make. So he appears at luncheon the next day. And this is pretty funny. He was dressed faultlessly in the tweeds of a country squire. He was solicitous about the state of Rainsford's health. Now, this is interesting because remember that they're in the Caribbean, like sort of, where are they? In the Leeward Isles, close to South America. And he's in the, damn it, I just broke my cigarette. Please support me so I can go out and buy some more cigs. He is in the tweeds of a country gentleman in this absolutely tropical atmosphere. It doesn't make sense, right? But that's because he is bringing civilization with him wherever he goes, and he's in this sort of pretend world, which becomes his neo-Gnostic garden. And this reminds me of the scene in A View to a Kill where Max Zorin takes Bond hunting, right? And he's got his tweeds on, and he's got my one of my friends brought this up recently. Like in that scene in A View to a Kill, the guy's out there, he's rustling the bushes, right? So the pheasant will fly, and Bond has the shotgun, and he casually sees the guy, turns, shoots him out of the tree, and then Zorin's like, oh, well, I see, Mr. Bond, you saw the man in the trees. These tweeds are from Savile Row. This is your father's watch. Got it from a coffee can from an airman named Wanaki. It's your father's birthright. It was his watch. Give me the watch. So the next morning, forgive my little tangents there. But we do it live here. We do it live, right? You give me the watch. You give me the watch. No way. We're going to let the greasy yellow hands his birthright. You give me the watch. So the next morning he says, you want to go hunting with me, basically. And he heard, he says, let's see, as for me, said the general, I do not feel so well. I'm worried, Mr. Rainsford. Last night I detected traces of my old complaint. And in his old complaint, what's his old complaint? Is a word we use many times here on this channel. Ennui. He says boredom. So, of course, this is Dorian Gray. This is pure Dorian Gray. And boredom breeds contempt. This is the contempt, right, of the elites for the world. He's going to invert this by saying, go hunting with me. And he says, I wish to go today, said Rainsford. Rainsford says, I want to leave. I want to get peace out of this bitch. Like, I need to get out of here. And he saw the dead black eyes of the general on him, studying him. General Zaroff's face suddenly brightened. Not tonight. He says, tonight. He says, not today. Tonight, we will hunt. You and I. Uh-oh. You know what that means? I love how this is a tight short story. It really is good because he's able to convey this unity and variety in his words. A lot of it is almost poetic. And when he says, we will hunt you and I, he doesn't need to explain to us that he doesn't mean the two of us are going to go hunting together. He means you and I will hunt each other. We know that's what he means. He says, no, General, I will not hunt. As you wish, my friend, the choice is entirely yours. You don't mean, my dear fellow, have I not told you that I never joke when I talk about hunting? I always mean what I say about hunting. I drink to a foeman worthy of my steel at last. So he raises a glass to him. And he says, you'll find this game worth playing, the general said enthusiastically. Your brain against mine. Outdoor chess, and the stake is not without value, eh? What this reminded me of was the scene, not the scene. This reminded me of real life. This reminded me of the story of Carlos Hathcock and the Cobra, right? The story in Nam of Carlos Hathcock, the Marine scout sniper who's out there hunting in a most dangerous game, right? Hunting people in wartime or in their, Michael Aquino arranged war games, right? But in wartime. And of course, there was a bounty on his head as they, I'm sure everybody's seen the documentaries. There's a bounty on his head, most successful sniper, right? Until Chris Kyle. And of course, Carlos Hathcock was here and the Cobra was here and they were hunting each other. And then they switched places, just like in this, they switched places. And then eventually the sun is behind Hathcock and it glints on the sniper scope of the Cobra. And then he shoots him right through the sniper scope is what Hathcock himself says. Just like they used in, that's like the eternal propaganda story of the sniper, right? But I'm sure that happens. And remember, that was in Saving Private Ryan. It occurs with, what's the name of that Finnish sniper who was so successful in World War II? The guy who killed like 800 people in the war. Had his face blown off. Chris Kyle said that happened in his book. But these two guys are going to hunt each other. And let me try and wind this up here. Rainsford says, I agree to nothing of the kind. He doesn't want to take part in this most dangerous game. And basically, Zaroff says, I'll give you my word as a gentleman and a sportsman that I won't break the rules if you win, when you go back, you won't tell anybody about this. And Rainsford says, this is pretty interesting. Rainsford says, I agree to nothing of the kind. Number one, I'm going to get out of here. He's not going to get out of there. And number two, if I get back, I'm telling everybody what a psycho you are. Right now, what's he going to? He's going to go to the New York Times and print this. The guy probably in his securities owns a part of it, right? As per usual. Remember in Network, same thing always occurs. But because of that, Zaroff says, "Oh, okay. Well, if you don't agree to that, then all bets are off, and we'll get going." So basically, what happens is he sets him out there into the jungle. He gives him a afternoon head start, and he gives him food and some supplies. He goes out. He ties himself to it. He crawls. Rainsford does something interesting because he is a hunter himself, just like with Katniss in the Hunger Games. He is able to utilize his primordial instincts and to double back a bunch of sort of concentric circles where he thinks he's going to throw off Zaroff. And then after he's tired, he climbs up in a tree and hides. But then he looks down and he sees that Zaroff is going through the woods, going through the jungle, and that he has an uncanny ability to sniff out a trail. He's all by himself, but he's smoking his black opiated gold silver cigarette. So the perfumes are kind of permeating the jungle canopy. And he looks down and he sees that Zaroff has caught onto the trail, and he looks around and he looks up into the tree, but he doesn't look high enough to see where Rainsford is perched. Now, Rainsford, what's interesting is that Rainsford knows at that point that he purposefully avoided his gaze. So he knows exactly where he is at the tree, and he retreats. He goes back home. He says, I have 3 days for this hunt. So he goes back home, and he says he's playing a cat and mouse game. So now Rainsford has to change his tactics when he's in the jungle. And it also talks about, by the way, in the scene, it talks about the apprehensive night crawled slowly like a wounded snake, and sleep did not visit Rainford, although the silence of the dead world was on the jungle. Oh, what a great sentence. He talks about Rainsford's impulse was to hurl himself down like a panther when he saw the general below him on the trail, but he didn't. And that's because, remember, he's now become the panther or the jaguar, the jaguar that he was talking about at the beginning of the short story. So using your powers of prediction in the short story, can you guess what Rainsford is probably going to do at the end? Well, he's going to best him, and I'll get to how he bests him. But it's left up to interpretation. Is he going to then take over the role of Zaroff? Is he going to become the new Zaroff? Which is interesting because that's what happens in Apocalypse Now. Kurtz assumes that Willard is going to do that, remember? Because there's the scene where Willard sits down at the typewriter. He's got the blade. He's got he's sitting at the typewriter, and he takes on the mission. He sort of takes on, they're doing the weird voodoo ceremony. They're going to sacrifice the cow, and then he sacrifices Kurtz at the same simultaneously. But he ends up leaving with Lance and going back downriver. But in this, go back and watch my Apocalypse Now. Right? Instead of watching Apocalypse Now, you can go back and watch my analysis with my friend Rollin it was from 1 year ago. He talks about his uncanny powers. And interesting, on the next page 15 of this 18-page short story, he says Rainsford did not want to believe what his reason told him was true. So he's using his powers of reason. And remember that reason was seeded earlier in terms of Rainsford uses reason versus the pure instinct of the animals. And then Zaroff talks about he wants to hunt an animal with reason, so he hunts human beings. And now he's going to do that thing where he's going to master reason and instinct. He says reason told him this was true, but the truth was as evident as the sun that had by now pushed through the morning mists. The general was playing with him. The general was saving him for another day's sport. The Cossack was the cat. He was the mouse. Then it was that Rainsford knew the full meaning of terror. So here we go. Here's his kind of transcendence into who he needs to be to win and who he's going to become by understanding terror, because he didn't know that before. Remember at the beginning of the short story. Following the trail with the sureness of a bloodhound came General Zaroff. Nothing escaped those searching black eyes, the crushed blade of grass, no bent twig, no mark, no matter how faint in the moss. This is just like in Predator, right? Billy! Remember Billy? Billy is the tracker. He's able to do this. And this is also, I hate to self-reference, but this is also part of my own book that I'm writing, where these characters are trained to do this in the most dangerous game as part of a Monarch MK Delta training when they're young, where even the blades of I'll actually read that in a little bit. I'll show you what I mean by that. But then he calls out to him. He actually calls out to him, Rainsford, if you're within sound of my voice, as I suppose you are, let me congratulate you. Not many men know how to make a Malay man catcher. Luckily for me, I too have hunted in Malacca. You are proving interesting, Mr. Rainsford, because Rainsford gets down off of the tree and then he makes punji sticks. Malacca, the Straits of Malacca is right by Malaysia. Remember, I lived in Malaysia for a summer. And then he had told him earlier about the death swamp. There's a quicksand death swamp. He actually finds himself in the death swamp, but then he makes use of it because Rainsford had dug himself in France when a second's delay meant death. So he uses his World War I experience to allow him to get out of this. And it says these stakes he planted in the bottom of the pit with the points sticking up, punji sticks, right? He knew his pursuer was coming. He heard the padding sound of feet on soft earth. So now he's almost becoming Zaroff. Zaroff told him, he gave him some moccasins and said that this will help you when I'm hunting you so that I can't hear you. And the night breeze brought him the perfume of the general's cigarette. So now his senses are totally attuned to the darkness. And Rainsford then says, your Burmese tiger pit is claimed one of my best dogs, because now Rainsford brings the hound, one of the hounds out to search for him, but he makes the Punji pit, and that kills one of the dogs, and then he's going to release all the dogs. So Rainsford, lying near the swamp, was awakened by the sound that made him know he had new things to learn about fear. It was a distant sound, faint and wavering, but he knew it. It was the baying of a pack of hounds. The hounds of love. I've always been a coward. The hounds of love are after him. And he knew he could do one of two things. He could stay where he was and wait. That was suicide. He could flee. That was postponing the inevitable. For a moment, he stood there thinking. An idea that held a wild chance came to him, and he, tightening his belt, he headed away from the swamp. On a ridge, he climbed a tree. Straining his eyes, he saw the lean figure of General Zaroff, and just ahead of him, Rainsford made out another figure, which is the giant Ivan, whose wide shoulders surged through the tall jungle weeds, and it was the giant Ivan. Rainsford knew that Ivan must be holding the pack in leash. The dogs of doom are howling moan. He thought of a native trick he learned in Uganda. So Rainsford himself has been all over the world. He's been in Malaya. He's been to Uganda. He's still not at this guy's level, but this guy knows all of his tricks. But he makes he basically gets a branch, swings it back. They use this in Predator, and he puts the dagger that he has on it, and that's going to kill Ivan. He's going to step on a trigger. It's going to stab Ivan in the face. The knife, driven by the recoil of the springing tree, had not wholly failed. And then what does he do? This is interesting. He jumps back into the sea. He goes out to the cliffs and he jumps back into the sea. And Zaroff thinks that he has tried to swim away or he's killed himself. I suppose in his hubris, but there's nowhere for him to go because he came here through the abyss. Now he's going to jump back. But when he does this, Zaroff lit a cigarette and hummed a bit from Madame Butterfly. Here we get monarch. We get monarch symbolism, not in terms of the author's purpose, but in terms of what we're reading into it as a kind of a later guidebook. I mean, you can't help but think of it that way. There you go, Jason. And so Zaroff goes back to his chateau and he reads Marcus Aurelius. And then he goes up to go to sleep, and he sees Rainsford hiding behind the curtain. He reveals himself behind the curtain. He pierces the veil. He says, I swam. I found it quicker than walking through the jungle. I got here by swimming. I congratulate you. You have won the game. Rainsford did not smile. I'm still a beast at bay. Get ready, General Zaroff. The general made one of his deepest bows. I see, he said, splendid. One of us is to furnish a repast for the hounds. The other will sleep in this very excellent bed. On guard, Rainsford. He had never slept in a better bed, Rainsford decided. So Rainsford wins. He wins. So it's a little trick there at the end. I think it's really interesting. And again, this is the same as just as in The Running Man, they offer Arnie a place on the television show, which he doesn't take, just as Rainsford is offered a role in The Hunt. The teacher sort of does the same thing in Battle Royale. He disappears and then comes back. Of course, he's the games master in that. Katniss also does this at the end of her saga in the Hunger Games. Remember, she starts off and then she ends up the leader of the revolution. So she comes back and destroys Panem at the end of the Hunger Games saga, not at the end of one. And it's interesting also because in terms of swimming, the current circles the story. So it's a current through the story, but it's also the literal current in which he swims. So he's at the beginning, he's riding on it, he falls into it, he crosses this chasm, crosses through the looking glass into the black waters, goes back in himself, and then emerges as a new Zaroff. Right? So the question is, what do you think he does at the end? I mean, he sleeps in the bed, but does he leave the place, or does he take it over and become the new lord of this place? I like the ambiguity at the end of this because it shows you that the guy had grounding, and it's not set that he's going to stay. Why would he stay and hunt people like this other guy did? But he did hunt him, but he was being hunted, or maybe just take over. I mean, it doesn't matter. What the point is that we have Bill Hartford against what's his name? Jethro. What's his name in I was watching Ziegler, right? Ziegler. The Zaroff, Max Zorn, right, who is defeated but lives in his private fiefdom where he is defeated, but sort of by choice. I mean, he accepts his fate there. So that's interesting. So that's the most dangerous game. I thought that would be a good prerequisite, right, for the other works that we're going to cover tonight. And again, please don't hesitate to support me here at the channel. Really need your support. And we're getting here to the end of the month. It's a hard time for everybody. But yes, getting here to the end of the month, I need your support. So so next up, let's do the Hunger Games. Now, I'm not going to take you through the whole Hunger Games like I did with that short story. I thought I would spend the most significant time on the short story. But if you guys, look, if you haven't read this, I know we do the canon of literature here. And, you know, Hunger Games isn't exactly in the canon, right? This is in the YA canon. But I would recommend reading this book because, you know, the film came out in 2012 and the book 2008. I read the book in 2010 or 11 and then read it again. And it's a good book. It's really good. The book is again, you know, it's not a surprise, but the book is superior to the movie in so many ways. So let me give you a rundown of what it's about, just for, you know, for the folks at home here, and to give you kind of an analysis of this interwoven with my rundown. So basically we have Katniss. Katniss Everdeen is the protagonist of the story. She is an 18-year-old, or, you know, I suppose she's 18 because the reaping is 12 to 18-year-olds. And she's living in District 12. And District 12 is at the end of the districts that sort of fan out or circle Panem. Panem is the new world city, the world capital, or at least it's one of these in the balkanized world, sort of 1984 balkanized world that occurs after the kind of apocalyptic war of the future. And what we learn is that Katniss lives in basically Virginia, West Virginia, in a coal mining, you know, there's coal mining. That's their industry there. Each district has an industry that supports Panem, where no one is, you know, they all live in poverty. But districts 1 and 2 are wealthier because they're closer to the Panem. And also the tributes. So we have, what we're going to figure out is we have these tributes, and each year there's this thing called the reaping. And that's where representatives from Panem go to the various districts, and they do a lottery, a Shirley Jackson lottery. And they pick 2 people from each district to fight in the Hunger Games. And the Hunger Games is a neo-gladiatorial bout that is supposed to focus the 15 minutes of hate to remind people of war, right? And it's also, you know, bred in circuses, so there will be no more war. It's also a kind of flex from Panem to show their, you know, ultimate power, that they control all these people and that nobody can live safely. So that's the real thing about it. That in the Hunger Games, you know, it's often remarked on, and what's usually analyzed is the fact that the Hunger Games themselves, right, and the lottery and the lottery aspects of it, and that, you know, you were forced to fight to the death. You can be an untrained gladiator. You can be anybody. But the fact is that the crux of this lies in the uncertainty and the total control of the pyramid system. That means that no matter where you are, anywhere in what, you know, used to be America, I suppose it represents a globalist system, that anyone can be found at any time, and everyone has to take part in this when they're youth. It's also important that it's the youth who are chosen for this, not the older people, because it shows that, for one, by not including the older people as tributes, it shows that they are already past expendability, that their lives are already worthless to the people in Panem. And that, of course, this is a vampirical system, again, just like we talked about with the most dangerous game, where they are living on hijacking the blood of the youth, literally in games that people bet on, in order to continue their own lives in a sort of a psychical way. I mean, they're not doing a Teeter Peel here, but I think that's the crux of what this book represents. It's also, I like it because it's a survival. It's a surviving the game story, but it's a survival story. And I've talked before about how I like those. How you can't, when you read these sorts of things, even though this one is obviously this is girl power. You can't help but read this and think, what would you do if you were in the situation? I mean, you can't. That's what you do when you read these disaster movies or natural disaster movies or books. You always do that. One thing that my hot take for this. Here's my hot take. Okay. Just like in Lord of the Rings, people talk about, why didn't you ride the damn eagles all the way to Sauron and do that at the beginning and skip over everything? Well, my hot take for this is sort of similar. Okay. When Katniss is volunteers. I volunteers tribute. It's a lame line in the movie. It's actually much more powerful in the book because I think that's a tough line to try to do as an actor. It's not very strong. But anyway, she volunteers because her sister Primrose, she's prim and proper. She's a small child, is chosen as a tribute. Katniss takes her place. So we see that she's obviously the heroine in the book because she's willing to sacrifice herself for those that she loves. So, right? So based in terms of that. But one thing that occurs in this is that when they are taken to she and this guy, Peta, it's obviously he's a baker because Pita bread, and his name is Peeta, Peta Malark, and there's some sort of acronym there that I don't care about, but they're taken by, high-speed train to the line of Pan Am, right? They're taken to the Saudi Arabian future city. And they see all the freaks and goblin people that live there. And they are immediately thrown into training, right? So it's just like in the Most Dangerous Game, they're training the tributes. But my hot take is, if you know that the system exists and people from your district have been taken and they've been killed, and you've been watching this, and this is the 75th Hunger Games, it's been going on for, longer than 3 times than you've been alive, 3 or 4 times longer than you've been alive, and you get there and you see these other characters and you're in training and they give you weapons, why in the training phase didn't she eliminate everyone right there? Right? Like, there's a scene in the film where Kato, who's played by Alexander Ludwig, who later played Bjorn Ironside in Vikings, which is great. And I hate to say it, but Kato is the alpha Chad of this group because they don't include Gale. So Gale is played by Liam Hemsworth, and Liam Hemsworth is not chosen, so he stays back and takes care of the family because he obviously is in love with Katniss, and we want him to get with her. And the question is going to become whether she's going to get with Peta, who's a soy, or she's going to get with Liam. So get with Liam, right? I mean, because that's the dude. And later, by the way, later on in one of the other films, I mean, they literally have a monarch scene where he is mind broken and then mind controlled by a Louis Jolene West or whatever, and he comes out with his weird makeup on. Anyway, so. While she's there, Kato, the names are obviously Roman, right? And Kato is the alpha from District 1. He's going to get the sword, of course. And he's going to be the main guy. Now, what's interesting is Kato is going to be the guy who lives by instinct in terms of the Hunger Games. And he just, he's the beast. And Katniss is the one who's going to, master instinct plus reason and make use of that and then win. Although she doesn't win, she wins with Peta because they changed the rules, and she ends up being a kind of a dual consul, a Roman consul. So there's 2 people in charge. Of course, they're not in charge of anything. They're going to be a danger to Panem. And there's a guy, President Snow. He's the president. Donald Sutherland was miscast for this movie, I thought. They needed somebody more in control of their faculties, I think, for the role. I mean, his voice suits it, but I didn't think that he was good for the role. That's just my take. But anyway, when they're training and he's got the sword, and, there's a scene where a kid has a dagger, and then Rue is one of the younger girls, and this is interesting because this came out when LaRue, right? I'm going in for the kill. I'm doing it for a thrill. Remember that song? So LaRue is seen up in the rafters because she's kind of she's like a pixie character, right? She's young and she's able to take things and she's able to climb trees and she's like basically flying around. She ends up in the ceiling and she's got the dagger and she looks up and she gives the shh to Katniss, and Katniss realizes, okay, this is going to be one of my buddies on this thing. Well, there's a scene where they have to split apart Kato and the other guy because they're gonna fight. You know, he's like, "Where's my dagger?" Well, Katniss gets the bow and arrow, and she's got a bunch of arrows, and she shows off by shooting, and she misses the mark, and then she's gonna gain PR, kind of Goebbels PR, by shooting this apple out of the mouth of this pig. Well, look. If you were one of the dudes there in that scene and they were fighting, why wouldn't you take advantage of it and just eliminate them all and there'd be no Hunger Games? They don't say that there's any rules. You don't have to go into the thing to fight. Why can't they just do it there? And then while you're starting that, why not fight the whole thing and the revolution start there? You have your bow and arrow and shoot it through one of the ghouls up there. What are they going to do? There's a bunch of like stormtrooper, helmet heads standing around. But like, come on, dude. Like, that's the thing about these stories. They always know that they're in for it. And it's that human thing where it's like, no, the worst isn't going to happen until it's too late. So why not just do it? I know it's a hot take, but like, why not just just win there? Right? Go into Bateman beast mode and just win there, I guess. What are they going to do? So the pig and the apple obviously represents the fact, Wes Bentley goes up there. Who brought this pig? Who brought this pig? I like Wes Bentley because Wes Bentley was, he was the guy with the bag in American Beauty. And then he was out of the movie game for a long time because I think he was he suffered from addiction. And then this was his comeback. But he goes up there and he's the games master in terms of the media. And they always have, this occurs in Running Man too, because there's a game room, media room where all the people are sitting around at their little soundboards. We got it. We're going live in 3, 2, 1. Right. And so he's controlling them. But of course, then at the end of the film, he is forced to eat the poison berries that I know I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going all over the place in terms of this analysis, but he is forced to commit suicide at the end of this thing. So the pig represents both the elites that have none of these guys have ever seen a pig, right? They're forced to eat like, muskrats and squirrels and stuff. And at the beginning of the movie, she's about to hunt a deer. She says, "The first deer I've ever hunted. I've hunted in a year." And Gale smartly scares her off from it, and he says, "You can't do that. There are people, the peacekeepers are all over the place, right? It's reaping day, so any other day it'd be fine." But what we see is that Katniss comes from the woods, and she is hungry. She's literally hungry, and she shoots this apple out of the pig's mouth because unlike plucking the apple, right? She is going to shoot the apple, and I'm not sure if I can make a biblical analogy out of this. But I think that the point is that it's both a William Tell sort of game that she plays by shooting the apple out of the pig's mouth, and also saying that she can win, demonstrating her skills, but also that this is foreshadowing that they are the game. They think that they're playing games and they're running games by running these tributes, but they are going to become the prey. They're going to become the game. So the game watchers, the game bettors will become the game themselves. Also that she refuses to take part, philosophically or even spiritually in the game that she's playing. Yeah, it's also that she's she sort of represents David versus Goliath in this. Moreover, she represents she's obviously Robin Hood in this, right? Because she's going to rob the pride of the rich and give it to the poor people in her district. The districts are going to unite. She also is willing to give to others in order to receive. There's a bunch of times where, you know, she's willing to sacrifice herself for PETA, for Rue. She's interested in the true bonds of friendship and not the fake alliances that will occur in the Hunger Games. She's from a kind of Sherwood Forest where the people from Pan Am are obviously supposed to be, you know, the sheriff of Rottingham. Remember in Robin Hood Men in Tights, Richard Lewis was King John and his mole kept moving? I thought that was funny. I like how Patrick Stewart at the end of that film has like the greatest cameo. He's King Richard. And he comes back. Because remember, Sean Connery is King Richard in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Look into my eyes, and you will see what you mean to me. Such a heart, such a soul. Okay. Yo, did you watch that video like 10 million times in 1991 when it came out and you were 11 years old like me watching MTV? I like how Morgan Freeman's in that movie. That's pretty cool. All right, so one big difference between the film and the movie is that, and one reason why Melly says I wasn't born. Well, I'm an old feller. I remember there was this thing called MTV in 1991. Guns N' Roses' Paradise City would come on TV, and I'd call my friend Brad and say, hey, Guns N' Roses is on. It was so cool. So listen, one big difference. Wow, we really dropped off because of that. Sorry. I guess my singing really dropped us by half. All right, look, thanks for the hardcore people still being here. No, listen, one big difference between the film and the movie is that the film and the book is that the book is written in the first person, and that's why the book works so in so many ways that the movie does not. Because even though we're following the protagonist Katniss through this, and we sort of stick to her, they're obviously they break in the point of view, and we see things that Katniss can't see. Whereas in the book, we're pretty consistent with staying with Katniss and her point of view, which gives us more of a reason to stick with the story. The book begins when I wake up, right? So we're waking up with her. By the way, Katniss is way hotter in the book, and that's hard to explain, but the movie does not do a good job of portraying this, like that she's a desirable character. You know, that she's physically beautiful, and that the other people she has to. I mean, you know, Woody Harrelson's character, Haymitch, will say this in the movie, like, you have to make people like you if you want to get, you know, if you want them to sponsor you. But the fact is that she kind of has a sour look on her face, like a doom throughout the film, which isn't necessarily true in the book. I mean, her rite of passage in the book is one of literal death, right? And it's strange that, I guess it's not okay. So the rite of passage for a normal human is, you know, much younger, but for her, it's been extended because even though there's been all the future wars, because she's living in a kind of idyllic state in District 12, away, so far away, the polar opposite from Pan Am. Pan Am is obviously supposed to be like, I always thought it was like Denver. It's like in Colorado, right? It's like where, you know, or Cheyenne Mountain or something. It's high up in the center of the country. And she lives on the outer district, right, in the coal mine, you know, in Virginia, West Virginia. And so they don't have much to do with the globalist so-called peacekeepers of Pan Am getting there. They can pretty much do what they want, which is one thing that is also kind of cool about a lot of these post-apocalyptic and dystopian books and movies. The thing that I always think about when I watch these is that in every single one of them, there's always a civilization that exists on the outer edges or as an underground, and they're always cooler. There's always more freedom, obviously, but you're free. If you live in District 12, you're essentially free in terms of the woods, right? In terms of her Robin Hood ethos. And she still has to, obviously she's not free because she's in the Hunger Games. She has to participate in this. But you know, I think that that's one thing that is sort of missing in the movie is the visceral sense of being alive, right? I mean, it's almost like, oh, it's this thing I have to go through. And yeah, that sucks, but she's really good at it. And we know from dramatic irony, even getting into the book, that she's going to win. We know the character's going to win, but it's the experience of finding out how she's going to win that is invigorating, right? But she says here, when I wake up, the other side of the bed is cold. Okay. So all of a sudden we get her and we get another. And this, in the very first sentence, it seems like a kind of a weak sentence at the start, but it's actually, there's a lot in that because it also shows us that is the other side of the bed a man or is the other side of the bed family? And it's cold because it's not just cold from the person not there, but it's a cold world. Like Jizza Genius says, it's a cold, cold world. My fingers stretch out, seeking Prim's warmth, but finding only the rough canvas cover of the mattress. So it's her sister. So she is, you know, they live in District 12, and the family has to sleep together for warmth, and she's taking care of her sister. And we're going to learn that this is foreshadowing later for her taking the place of her sister in the reaping. She must have had bad dreams and climbed in with her mother. Of course she did. This is the day of the reaping. Her dad, by the way, in this is no more, but in the film, her dad's not there, but they kind of allude to the fact that he's somewhere around, like working. But in this, I think he's dead. I might be misremembering that. But why would the family patriarch not be alive in this? Well, because they eliminated him. That would make more sense. They didn't do that in the film. They just eliminated his presence. In sleep, my mother looks younger, still worn, but not so beaten down. Prim's face is as fresh as a raindrop, as lovely as the primrose for which she was named. My mother was very beautiful once, too, or so they tell me. In the second chapter, she says, one time when I was in a blind in a tree, waiting motionless for game to wander by, I dozed off and fell 10 feet to the ground, landing on my back. It was as if the impact had knocked every wisp of air from my lungs, and I lay there struggling to inhale, to exhale, to do anything. That's how I feel now, trying to remember how to breathe, unable to speak, totally stunned as the name bounces around the inside of my skull because she's at the reaping and she hears her sister. So it's like she's fallen. She's fallen from a tree. She's fallen out of the tree of life. She's fallen out of Eden. Now she's where death exists, right? And also this is foreshadowing for her when she gets to, she's extremely lucky in that when she gets to the Hunger Games, they haven't made it Arctic or desert landscape. They've made it her woods landscape. So it's fit for her. It's meant for her. Not purposefully, I don't think. But she's just lucky in that sense. She volunteers. Yeah, I got a note about it's the first person. Katniss. Let's see. On page 21 of the book, it says, I was terrified. I suppose now that my mother was locked in some dark world of sadness. See, this is what we don't get in the movie. I suppose that my mother was locked in some dark world of sadness, but at the time, all I knew was that I had lost not only a father, there you go, she lost her father, but a mother as well. At 11 years old, with Prim just 7, I took over as head of the family. There was no choice. I bought our food at the market and cooked it as best I could and tried to keep Prim and myself looking presentable because if it had become known that my mother could no longer care for us, the district would have taken us away from her and placed us in the community home. I'd grown up seeing those home kids at school, the sadness, the marks of angry hands on their faces, the hopelessness that curled their shoulders forward. I could never let that happen to Prim, sweet tiny Prim who cried when I cried before she even knew the reason, who brushed and plaited my mother's hair before we left for school, who still polished my father's shaving mirror each night because he'd hated the layer of coal dust that settled on everything in the seam. That's where they live, in the seam. The community home would crush her like a bug, so I kept our predicament a secret. but the money ran out and we were slowly starving to death, and there's no way to put it. I kept telling myself I could only hold out until May, just May 8th. So this is interesting because I think the stream's okay. I think we're doing okay. I got some little blips here and there, but I think we're maybe we are lagging a bit. No, we should be. Yeah, we should be okay. I think we're okay. Are we lagging? Let me check. Let me make sure we're not lagging, folks. Are we doing all right? Seraphim, are we doing all right? Maybe we are lagging a little bit. Or maybe it's just me. Little glitches. I don't know what that is. Yeah, maybe it's just my internet too. I'm on green. Now I'm on red. So I don't know. Hopefully we're doing okay. I'm looking at it on my phone and it doesn't look at. Okay, so anyway, I'll keep going. Freeze framing a little bit, but hopefully we're doing all right. There we go. Okay. So what I was going to say is this is relevant because run the Sandinista down there. This man's bring the hurricanes. This man's a communist. What I was going to say is that this is interesting because it is the same. This is now. This is the same as when the book was written, but this is now, and this is becoming more so the way it's going to be in the future in terms of the seam, the dichotomy between the line and the right, the Saudi Arabian line, the future city, right, and the classes on the outside of civilization, right? It's gonna keep being this way, where, the way that she talks about poverty, right, and about having to keep all of their predicaments at home and having to take up for the family. This is an age-old thing, but it's going to keep going, right, where she has to take up for the family and survive for them is going to keep becoming a thing. We all know that that's true. The division between rich and poor will keep getting worse. We get a history of District 12 here, and this is on page 29, and this is a bit like, this is essentially Robin Hood, where they are poaching. They're poaching the king's, the king's game in order to survive, in order to eat. They'll do whatever they can. Page 45, we get pods. We go to another compartment to watch the recap of the reapings from Pan Am. They try to stagger them throughout the day so a person could conceivably watch the whole thing live, but only people in the capital can really do that since none of them have to attend reapings themselves, right? And that what's interesting is that, rules for thee, not for me, right? And that they live in the pods. In Pan Am, of course, they don't live in the pods. The elites live how they want to live, how they tell everyone else that they live, but they don't. We get on page 94 the districts and the difference between the kids. The exceptions are the kids from the wealthier districts, the volunteers, the ones who have fed and trained throughout their lives for this moment. The tributes from 1, 2, and 4 traditionally have this look about them. It's technically against the rules to train tributes before they reach the capital, but it happens every year. In District 12, we call them the career tributes, or just the careers, and like as not, the winner will be one of them. So those are the people from Districts 1 and 2, which are close to Pan Am. And this is where we get Cato. We get the pig episode on page 121. And then also there's the motif of the rejuvenating woods, which occurred in The Most Dangerous Game. And this is page 152. Funny, though, I don't feel too bad. The days of gorging myself have paid off. I've got staying power, even though I'm short on sleep. Being in the woods is rejuvenating. I'm glad for the solitude, even though it's an illusion, because I'm probably on screen right now. Not consistently, but off and on. There are so many deaths to show the first day that a tribute trekking through the woods isn't much to look at. But they'll show me enough to let people know I'm alive, uninjured, and on the move. So, of course, the whole thing is being live streamed, right? One of the heaviest days of betting. Oh, remember, also, they get a stabby. when they're on the way to the actual simulated synthetic world, they get the stabby, and the stabby is a track and trace. One of the heaviest days of betting is the opening where the initial casualties come in, but they can't compare to what happens in the field as the field shrinks to a handful of players, 11 dead and 13 left to play. My fingernails scraped at the dried blood. The boy from District 9 coughed into my face. See, these are details that you don't get in the movie, and the movie is supposed to show these and convey them, but it doesn't do a good job of this. It doesn't convey the rejuvenation of the woods, right, and the nature versus a globalist Panem, or even the drab reality of the seam. We sort of get this in the ambiance and the music, but it doesn't really convey this very well. What happens basically in the Hunger Games after this is she's in the woods and she has to survive, and they all kill each other. She makes friends with Rue. PETA, who is supposed to be her fellow, gets with the other guys, and we can see that he's just trying to stave off his own death. They track her to a tree, just like in The Most Dangerous Game. They find her at a tree. She uses these things called tracker jackers, which are genetically modified gill baits, wasps. She cuts. They're hallucinatory and hallucinogenic, and their stings or lethal. And she cuts a branch. The branch kills one of the girls. They all scatter. She's able to get away, and then she's healed by Rue. Eventually, she meets back up with PETA. Now, PETA is the soy beta of the group, and this is a total girl power movie book, because one thing that bugs me is that her specialty is, of course, the bow and arrow, and his specialty is what? Makeup, right? He's a baker. He did save her life, we learned earlier, and he has a crush on her, but one thing that happens in this is that there's a scene where he's gotten away, and she looks down. Let me see if I can find it, actually. She looks down, and she sees... Yeah, here it is. This is page 252. It says, I whip around. It comes from the left, so I can't pick it up very well, and the voice was hoarse and weak. Still, it must have been PETA. Who else in the arena would call me sweetheart? My eyes peruse the bank, but there's nothing. Just mud, the plants, the base of the rocks. Peruse means to read deeply, right? Norm MacDonald. PETA, I whisper, where are you? There's no answer. Could I just have imagined it? No, I'm certain it was real and very close at hand, too. PETA, I creep along the bank. Well, don't step on me. I jump back. This is creepy to me. His voice was right under my feet. Still, there's nothing. Then his eyes open, unmistakably blue in the brown mud and green leaves. I gasp and am rewarded with a hint of white teeth as he laughs. It's the final word in camouflage. Forget chucking weights around. PETA should have gone into his private session with the game makers and painted himself into a tree or a boulder or a muddy bank full of weeds. Close your eyes again, I order. He does, and his mouth, too, and completely disappears. Most of what I judge to be his body is actually under a layer of mud and plants. His face and arms are so artfully disguised as to be invisible. I kneel beside him. I guess all those hours decorating cakes paid off. Oh my gosh. Isn't that pathetic? Okay, so look. So in Predator, he conceals himself in mud, but he doesn't paint his makeup on, right? He's covered in mud from crawling under the fallen trees and where the alien demon is going to hunt him, right? The DARPA alien demon with body mods is hunting him through the ravine, and he's trying to get away from the stabbing and the blades and the explosion, and so he falls in the water, and then he falls in the mud, and then he conceals himself and shuts his eyes, and he knows the predator can't see him. But in this, it's like this dude is the final word in camouflage. No. So she even says here, oh, he should have just hidden the whole time. Now, look, yes, there is work smarter, right? But this ain't working smarter. This guy is literally below her, right? He's literally below her, and she's stepping on his face. So the symbolism here seems to be one of this guy is total soy, and he does do things for her. and he does, want to sacrifice himself for her, but it's just in a soy way, isn't it? Right? I mean, he joins Kato's group. Yeah, I understand that he uses that as a ruse and then he survives, and that's fine because they have to survive. But I can't think of an instance where he's like outright fighting like she does. And you learn this baking cakes. I mean, right there, that's enough. It's like, whoa, dude. Poor fella. She really misses Gale at this point. And I guess his name's Gale, by the way, because he's he's like Gaelic, right? Like he's on the edge. He's a sort of Viking, or Gale, like a gale force wind. But also, it's still not the most, they just don't have the most masculine people in this story, for purposely so, right? But anyway, so he's down there in the mud, and then finally at the end, what happens is they release these human dog chimeras after them, and Kato, who's broken a kid's neck, and he's all this stuff. PETA ends up, he has him by the throat. He has PETA by the throat. She shoots the arrow through his hand. That allows him to move his hand and then push PETA off into the to be consumed by the hounds of love, the dog hounds, just like in Most Dangerous Game, but they're turned on him. And they change the rules so that there can be two winners. Then they change the rules so there has to be one winner. So then they're going to commit suicide together in a star-crossed lovers Romeo and Juliet pact, right? We did Romeo and Juliet, and then when they're about to do it, then they change the rules again. But then that means that the games master has to commit suicide using the same method. And now that they win the Hunger Games and there's two winners, they make it so that they represent a kind of political threat to the ruling class, because now people believe in something. Also, I love how they use the Boy Scout motto they just blatantly use the Boy Scout motto as their symbol, right? A scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Y'all didn't know I was an Eagle Scout, did you? But they use that as their, I volunteer as tribute thing. Thank you for your consideration. Wow. What he says, wow, that was really something. What did you say again? Thank you for your consideration. That's wild. That's wild. You said that. Ooh, they're going to hate that. Haymitch is way better in the book, too, because we see that they don't allow the Haymitch character we don't fully explore who he is as a character, but we can, if this was anything, if it was fuller, we would know that the reason that he drinks and the reason that he hates himself is because he's a survivor. He won the Hunger Games. He's a winner, and he has to train these two from District 12, and he hates the fact that he survived and the others died, and he doesn't see the reason for this in their cruel system, and that every year that goes by, he has to see more of these KIDS be killed. It's sick. It's a fucking sick system. It's a sick globo world, and he hates it, and there's nothing that he can really do about it, which is why he hates himself. So there's a lot more of that in the book than there is in the film. In the film, they kind of just make him out to be a buffoon. But on the other hand, the buffoon character, the fool character, oftentimes in terms of these works, will be the wise character, right? With King Lear, right? And I don't know. We also know that setting him up as the alcoholic character is going to allow us to find some sort of I don't know. He's going to find some sort of salvation. He's going to be restored, right? He seems to be perma-stoned and alcoholic in the movie. I don't know if I said play, but in the movie. But he's going to be restored in terms of his. I mean, he does do that. But remember, when she gets injured, he gets the sponsors. He works hard. He gets the sponsors. He's sober-minded, and he gets her help as best he can. And then that's going to continue through the rest of the books and films. But the Boozer character will be redeemed, right, is what we know. But it seems to be set up kind of too easily. It doesn't explore it fully. But anyway, so that's the Hunger Games. Okay, let's move on because we still got 2 more films to do. Let's do Battle Royale, and then we'll finish with The Running Man, which is the great film. So before we do that, let's see if we have any super chats to read just before we go any further. I want to thank Jason. As usual, I want to thank Jason, our big supporter, my most constant supporter, who sends me $8 on PayPal. Thank you so much, Jason. Really appreciate you. He says, wish I could give more. Looking forward to the takes on The Running Man. Thank you, Jason. Really appreciate you as always. My beautiful, wonderful mod also out there. Let's see. Also, shouts out to Michael out there who sends $20. Thank you so much, Michael. Really, really appreciate you. That's very kind of you. Thank you for that. And before I go any further, let's look and see if we got any super chats over here on YouTube. I don't think we have any. You guys, you can still use the, let's see. Oh, maybe we do. No, we don't. Okay, so if you want to use the super chat function, also, you can do that. We're monetized. If you want to use the super chat function down there on YouTube, you can do that and have your comment read. And you can also donate via PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo, of course. Please use those. I could really use your support. And let's go into Battle Royale real quick. I'm just going to do a quick, let's see. It might have Sabrina. Let me check one more time. Donut chat. I need to refresh it. Sabrina uses the donut chat function. And oh, there we go. Yes, you did. Okay, awesome. Let's see. Kira sends $5. It says buy beats, not 6. Hey, thank you for the $5. I appreciate that. And I will give that a thought. How about that? Is that good enough? How about that, Dan? Shouts out to First Person Q, sends $5 also. And says, I had to dip early last stream because someone found my lost dog in the middle of a great stream. But hey, I'm glad you found your lost dog. Thank God for that. Thank the Lord that you found your lost dog. I really do. I'm glad to hear that. That's some great news. We love dogs on this channel. Shouts out to Bon Jovi 1912 who sends $50 on Dono Chat and says, appreciate you, man. Hey, I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much. Shouts out to Tommy Jones who sends $10 an hour ago and says, God bless you, brother. Hey, God bless you too, Tommy Jones. Thank you so much. Shouts out to Sabrina who sends $25 on Dono Chat. Thank you so much, Sabrina. Says, get that meal and throw in a beer. Nice surprise with an old short story I could not find. Enjoy. Hey, thank you so much. I don't drink beer. I don't drink, but I appreciate the thought, and I will certainly use that to get myself a nice Red Bull and a nice McD's dollar menu. And thank you for appreciating that short story. Shouts out to Moldy Apple who said, dang, we got a lot of support tonight. Shouts out to Moldy Apple who says $22 on Dono Chat and says, how long have you had Dono Chat? I have had Dono Chat for at least 6 months. It's been up here every stream, and thank you for using it. I really appreciate that and appreciate the question because it allows me to say I've had Dono Chat since about, let's see, April, May, June, July, August. So, I don't know, 5 or 6 months at least. And we've had it up here on every stream, up here in the channel description, and up here in the links. So thank you so much for using that. I really appreciate that, Monty Apple. Thank you for that $22. I really appreciate it. Yeah, you guys, look, you can use Dono Chat. It's in the, if you go to the channel description, if you go to the video description and you hit the down button or you hit more, you can see the Dono Chat, and it's right there. You can also see if you're watching this later, you can go to if you're on YouTube and you see it's got videos, live. I don't have any videos. It's all live. We do it live here. It's all live, and then podcasts, and then playlists, and then community, and then about. If you go to about and you look down, it's got my 3. I'm saying this genuinely. If I sound sarcastic, I'm not being sarcastic. I don't use sarcasm. And you look down there, you can see It's got my 3 main links there, and you can use those anytime to support me. I really appreciate it. Of course, I can always use that support, right? So, thank you so much. Lots of support. Yes, lots of support there on Dono Chat. Thank you so much. And you can use the Super Chat function. And again, you can use PayPal, Cash App, Venmo. And let me just drop those real quick. Sorry to do this right in the middle, but I'm just going to do this real quick just to make sure you have those so you can support me because we do it live here. And again, it's the end of the month. All right, so there's Venmo. And then, and you can also, you know what also helps is sharing the stream, you guys. Look, I mean, the numbers are getting down, and not just for me, for a lot of people. If you look across all the people that we follow, that you follow, some people always do well, of course, and some people, go up. But in terms of the algorithm, things are getting crushed right now. They want shorts and all that. So, Ryan Darrow says, damn it, I missed the stream. Hey, Ryan, you still got 2 more movies here we're going to cover. So, yes, if you want to support me, you can do those on those links, and you can share the stream. You guys, please help me help me to increase my audience. We're doing it slowly, and we're fine. We're doing it slowly, and you know what? Increase the audience, but guess what? I say this again genuinely. I'm so happy, and I love all the people that are here with us right now. Okay? I'm thankful for the people that are here with us right now. Yeah, Bourgeois Beatnik says TikTok infection taking over too. Absolutely. So, but this is the mode that we use. This is long form. This is deep analysis. I would say you're going to get it a few other places, obviously, people in our circles. This is what we do. But in terms of the outer rims, you're not going to get this from those people, right? You get the 10-minute videos, and that's fine. That's fine that they do that, but this is deep analysis. So let's look at, speaking of deep analysis, I'm going to go pretty quickly through Battle Royale. Okay, so Battle Royale is interesting because I saw this when it came out. It's a Japanese film. It's sort of recognized as a cult classic. I saw this when it came out, taking the headphones off. So this is a cult classic from 2001, and it's got Takeshi Kitano in it, the guy from Zatoichi, and a famous Japanese actor. But what's important about this is pre-Hunger Games, but it takes its cue, obviously, from The Most Dangerous Game. So what they do in this is it's sort of a Running Man thing where we have a group of Japanese school kids who are tribute age. I think they're 9th graders in the movie, and they are taken out of school. We see one of them at the beginning of the film assault one of the teachers, who is Takeshi Kitano, who leaves, and then they are put on a bus for a field trip. They're taken to an island, and they are brought into a room, and they all have the same collars on that they do in The Running Man. So the collar is obviously supposed to represent that they are entrapped by the elites, and that they now function as dogs or animals or beasts, and they're going to be but they're going to be used as entertainment in this gladiatorial bout. And Takeshi Kitano tells them that they are in a place where the government has now made a rule. They've made a law where there's so much violence amongst the young people that they are going to be forced to do a battle royale. There's 100 of them, and only one will survive. And of course, this functions as the bread and circuses of the elite, and is also as a focus for the violence and the 5 minutes of hate in 1984. Yes, it's also Melly. It's also just like The Purge. But one thing that's interesting here is the kind of unreliability of there's no narrator, except for the narrator in this movie is interesting in that it is the screen presence of, in Hunger Games, every time someone dies, we get the cannon boom. So it's martial, right? In this, we get a screen like it's a reality show, and we get a kind of backstory of many of the characters. And that sort of functions as our Greek chorus or as a narrator. And so one thing about this is that I don't trust when I'm watching it that the government has made this rule, because even though Takeshi Kitano's character, the teacher, comes in and he runs it, and why would he be running it? right? And he's running it as a programmer with a military backing behind him who are armed, and they have a whole tech setup, and they're all tracked and traced. So this reminds me more of Monarch or an MK Ultra program than a reality show where, I mean, I know that in the Running Man, the kind of Monarch program has been infused with media in the dystopian world of government and media all conglomerating and in this kind of neo Rome, which is only a few years away, like it is there, I'm sure. But yes, Pete Takeshi. No, we haven't done any of those. But we just mentioned Zatoichi, but that's it. But this sort of, it seems to me like a test experiment because he tells them what the rules are. He assaults some of them. One of them gets their head blown off, and we get the kind of gratuitous, Japanese style violence that, by the way, that occurred because, do you know why they do that in movies? I mean, that was in Kill Bill. Quentin Tarantino sort of popularized it in terms of Kill Bill. And one of the characters in this is the bad girl in Kill Bill that has the ball and chain saw thing. She got a role in that because of this. But the reason that that's popular with the spraying blood from the neck and all that is because of that scene with is it the Seven Samurai? I think it's in the Seven Samurai, right, where they have the quick duel with the samurai sword, with the katana, and there's an accidental blood spray, and they said keep it. Something went wrong with the prop, and then they kept it, and then it was so popular. We haven't, Kit says, have we done Ran? I put Ran as the cover for the King Lear stream, but we haven't done Ran, the film, which is King Lear. But we haven't done that. But I have the Criterion Collection here, DVD here. So then what happens is they all get split up, and they, to make a long story short, they all get split up, and some of the characters, it's essentially Lord of the Flies hyper version. We've done Lord of the Flies. It's Yojimbo. Okay, thank you, Chronosis. And some of the characters will end up in where their personalities, inclinations were going, and they become bloodthirsty. Other characters will become heroic. Other characters will become sort of Gumby soys who, there's this one character who is in love or thinks he's in love with this other character. He has a crossbow, and he threatens to kill her if she doesn't, sleep with him. Right. So it's a teen, it's a teen movie. And she says, "You're disgusting to me." And she ends up stabbing him to death. Then she's in love with one of the cool guys. And then he dies. And then one of the girls dies, and he says, "You look so cool." So it's a weird kind of blood pop culture movie where, you, by the way, who the two guys are going to be that are kind of the heroes or the chads of the group, because they're two characters that are brought in when everybody's sitting in that room at the beginning, and they're on opposite sides of the room. One is this kid with a headband, right? He got a headband on, and he actually gets an automatic weapon. He learns how to make, he goes off he finds a shed, he makes rice, he supports one of the other guys. And then there are some hero hackers. They learn how to hack the system and get rid of their collars. And then there's another guy who is like kind of a dangerous punk, kind of a rocker punk goth character with wild hair, and he's going to be one of the other killers. But there's a scene sort of near the end with the girls they get together, they all kill each other, and there's the famous line in the movie where they talk about this is so stupid, we've all been so stupid, we didn't have to die, and there are these flashback scenes with one of the girls and the teacher. And basically, the movie, just to summarize the movie is a microcosm of society and what people will do when, in terms of fight or flight and in terms of saving themselves, right? Some people will save them. Some people will save other people, will give to other people, and in doing so will actually survive. Right. Or the time that they survive is important to them. knowing that they're going to die anyway. We're all going to go. Other characters will do anything to survive and will kill everyone else. Other characters, I mean, it is funny. It's funny in it's a black comedy action. So there are funny scenes, but it is, it's a hyper pop version of Lord of the Flies mixed with The Most Dangerous Game. And it's a dark film because you sort of, it's supposed to make you think what people will do in these situations, and people will do that, right? So it becomes Mad Max, The Road. We've talked about The Road, right? Cormac McCarthy's The Road. Go back to my Road stream. And it's pretty interesting. But other than that, I'm not sure if how much more we can go into the film. So I think that a better version of this would be The Running Man. So shall we do The Running Man? Let's talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger and The Running Man. So first of all, did you know that this film was directed by Starsky? Yes, this movie is directed by Starsky, and let me show you some of this here. So let me see if I can pull this up. Let me get my window up. Sorry, you guys. How do I get this up? God, OBS is so difficult to use. I don't want window capture. I don't want display capture. Okay, I don't think I can figure out this. I want my window capture. Hold on. I'm sorry. Give me a second here. There we go. Okay, there we go. Got it. So, move that up. Okay, I got it. Let me lower that. Oh my God. Okay, I'm not gonna be able to figure that out. Okay, I was gonna show you this thing about yeah, I'm totally boomer teching it here, you guys. Oh my God. OBS is so difficult for me when I'm a boomer. It's so ridiculous, dude. Nope, that's not it either. Okay. All right, yeah, I'm boomer teching it. All right, so look, I'll just take you through it. All right, so what happens with Hunger Games? I mean, with Hunger Games, with The Running Man, which is directed by Starsky and written by Richard Bachman, who is Stefan Kang. Did you know that? So it stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, and what happens is the movie begins with the future, and it talks about how the media is essentially an arm of the government, is run by the government in the future where there are food riots. No, Running Man is Richard Bachman, Stephen King, and we just covered PKD though in Scanner Darkly over on my friend Digital Mindfields channel, and. Yes, and it takes place in 2017. And it's interesting because in 2017, it talks about the food riots, and we see Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he is in a helicopter with a bunch of special forces, Einsatzgruppen, I guess, in a helicopter, and they are given orders that there's a riot down in one of the pod cities, in the Cube City. And they're flying in, and he gets orders to eliminate the food riot. So what he does is he He says, screw your freedoms. No, he says, they're just some people who want to eat. I'm not shooting you, helpless people. And they say, that's your orders. Go and do it. So he's supposed to go down and waste them. And it's interesting because it looks like a Las Vegas Harvest Festival down there, and he's in the black helicopter, and he refuses to fire on him, though. And the other guys, like, try to overpower him, whatever. And then next thing we see is that he's in a re-education camp with Jordan Peterson, and he is working, he's got his collar on. They've all got their collars on, and they're using LRAD, hypersonic weapons systems to make sure that if they go past the barrier, then they'll be decapitated. But, of course, there's Yaphet Kotto and the obligatory nerd with the glasses, and he's the hacker. And then there's the Chicano guy, and they start a revolution. They fire, a little mini rebellion, I should say. And they fire on the guards, and one of them gets decapitated, and then they end up hacking the system, and they get out. Well, then they make their way to the revolutionary group, and it's interesting because they make their way to the underground group, like the Dennis Leary group in Demolition Man. But this is run by, who's this run by? Mick Fleetwood. So Mick Fleetwood takes he's able to take the collar off of these guys, and there you go. And of course, Schwarzenegger sits down, and he's got his World Gym top on, right? And he's got his cigar, and he says, "You guys talk too much. All you want to do is talk. All you guys want to do is talk. You don't want to do anything." So he's fed posting, but they don't know whether he is for real or not. They say, "We can't trust this guy. Look, he's been with us and he helped us escape, but we don't know if he's one of us." And so the next day we see them, and they're living out there on the outlands, of the FEMA camps. And Schwarzenegger picks up work as a migrant because guess what? The migrants are crossing over the electro border wall, and they're going to get work. So he disappears with them. He makes his way back to the city, back to Pod City. He goes up in the cube apartment where Marita Conchita Alonso is working out with her synthesizer. She makes synth music for the Globo operation. And he puts his hand on her face and he says, "Don't scream. This was my brother's. This is my brother's apartment," right? And they have their little tussle. He finds that she's got some contraband in the place. You're not so you're not so clean. But we learned that the butcher of Bakersfield, as he's called, not the butcher of Lyon, not Klaus Barbie, but the butcher of Bakersfield is Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's on the loose. He's on the lam. Next, we're introduced to Richard Dawson. I keep wanting to say Richard Dawkins, but it's Richard Dawson. Richard Dawson's interesting because Richard Dawson is the Family Feud. Remember, he's the Family Feud host. Remember in The Family Guy? "Don't get your hands off me. I served in the fictitious military." And then he makes out with Lois. Well, he's in this, and he's got his pinky ring on, and he does a lot of pinky acting in this. Like, if you noticed, every time he drinks, he's got his coffee, and he's got his... Listen. How are you guys ready? Yes, hello. And he does this. And now somebody's going to clip that. But look, he does a lot of throwing up those hook 'em horns, devil horns in this because he's the functionary for the government. He's the Goebbels guy, right? He's the guy working for Nero. And he does a whole lot of, he's got his kind of futuristic suit with shoulder pads and his button collar with no tie and his kind of Caesarian haircut. Notice he's got kind of a Caesar do and this. What's his ring got on it? I couldn't see if it was a Masonic ring. It was probably a future Masonic ring, right? Or an order of the Ox or whatever from Lord Blackwood. Remember from Sherlock Holmes' Game of Shadows. Remember the Order of the Ox? Lord Blackwood, remember, was Aleister Crowley in that second Sherlock Holmes RDJ movie. Anyway, so he's like look, we've got a bunch of people in here. You know, he's on the phone. He's like, you're fired. Give me the media, right? And he says, get the Justice Department on the phone. And he says, basically, he tells them, you know, you can't have it both ways, right? You either have full-on Running Man blood and guts on screen so people won't riot, or people will see this as their distraction, or you have this, you know, kind of imitation show and you get your riots. And so they give him everything he wants. And then he sees a video of the butcher of Bakersfield running. He says, oh, darling, who? He says, oh, darling, who are you? And he does his little fingers. And he sees him. They get him in there, and they put Arnie in the gold lame Elvis plush costume of the Running Man. The neckline is cut too low in this. It always bothered me about the movie. Like, I don't like how they, you know, he's Arnie, he's buff or whatever, but they cut the neckline real low. They should have had it up tighter, right? Which is weird. It makes it look kind of feminine in a way. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. It looks kind of weird. But anyway, maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the point, that you know, these guys are supposed to be buff Gladio, but it is weird. So then they get him, and they say, you're going to compete in this, and they put him in these you know, future tube dune buggy things with rockets on the back, and they send him out into the zonal abyss. Right now, these tubes were like popular. Remember, they did this in The Living Daylights. Also, they put him in the pneumatic tube. Right, they put the general in the pneumatic tube to go across the border into Czechoslovakia, and these were big in the late 80s. Also, he's obviously got an electric vehicle. He's got an electric limousine. Did you notice that? This is common for, you know, these movies, but it just shows you how the future, you know, has come true. You notice it's got the whirring sound of the sort of Tesla as he's, you know, riding up to the mirror building. Anyway, so they put him in these pneumatic tubes, and they send him out, and they have to fight. Now, the crazy thing about this movie is that we have the common people who are out of their jobs in District 12 mining, which is what Arnie starts off as in the movie. He's a miner, right? Or he's a steel worker, like from District 11. And they're all supporting the Pan Am City. So that's the way it is, right? By the way, you just know that this is going to be the way it is with the Line. The Line is the city in Saudi Arabia that they're building the 33-mile-long skyscraper pod city, right, from Dread in the middle of the desert. And what is going to support this? Well, it's going to be the concentric circles of laborers in all these other parts that are going to support the nuclear city, right? And so that's what happens in the film. And so Arnie has to fight against various members of, you know, popular TV heroes, right? Where the people in the studio audience are interesting because they are there to watch the Gladio battle, and it's on TV, but all the people from the mining facilities and all this, they're outside betting. And there's a point in the movie where they finally, there's that great point in the movie where Richard Dawson, what's his name? Killian asks the old lady who she's betting on, and she says, I'm betting on Ben. I'm betting on the butcher of Bakersfield. And he says, I'm sorry, darling, you can't bet on him. And she says, nobody said I couldn't do that. I can do anything I want. He's a mean motherfucker. And then because of that, everybody outside decides to change their bet, and then it goes 100-1 for Ben. And then, you know, so now there's popular support. And that shows popular support for the underground revolution that's going to happen as the denouement in the movie. But what this says to me is that, you know, the studio audience is made up of all type of yuppies and boomers and greatest generationers. And I think that this is saying that in the future, once this will probably happen, that there will be a time this is not prophetic or something, but it seems probably obvious to everyone, but there will be a time when there will be one singular boomer woman who is a total normie who expresses her support for something in the Bazed community, and that through media dissemination is going to change the normie people's minds, I suppose. At least that's what happens in the film, right? But before that, he's got to fight various people. First, he fights the ice hockey dude, right? Let me find the picture here. So he fights the ice hockey dude, and he strangles him with barbed wire. Then he has to fight Buzzsaw. Buzzsaw is this guy who is this blonde beast who reminds me a lot of what was that? Was this wrestler's name? Was it David Schultz? Remember the guy who went on like Letterman, or was that the guy who fought Andy Kaufman? Who was the guy who fought Andy Kaufman, the Memphis guy? Okay, somebody look that up for me. But I know there's a wrestler named David Schultz because he's a blonde guy, and he looks exactly like my friend David Schultz, who is blonde. Buzzsaw comes out. Remember, he's a celebrity. He comes out and he presses the guy's face. Buzzsaw just touched me, man. Right. Oh, it's Jerry Lawler. Thank you. Who's David Schultz? There's also a David Schultz. So when he fights Buzzsaw, when Arnie fights Buzzsaw, he fights him. I mean, he's got the saw, and he does the thing where he splits him in half, and he says he had to split. As this is going on, Maria Conchita Alonso, who's at the corporation, is looking through the Rolodex stack of mini discs, and she sees raw footage. She sees the live leak, the raw footage of the actual Butcher of Bakersfield event, which is where Arnie did not shoot any of the people, and they've doctored it. So it's all propaganda, right? David Schultz slapped John Stossel. Thank you, first person Q. Yes, I knew there was a David Schultz because that's my buddy. That's my best friend in Belfast. So she gets taken and she gets thrown into the game. So now she's in it. And then also Arnie's going to end up with his two buddies from before. He's going to end up with Yaphet Kotto, who's going to get cut, and he will sacrifice himself. By the way, he's an interesting character in this because he never is a true believer in Arnie. He never believes that Arnie is not Fed posting until the very end when he says, "Get to the thing and remember the code so we didn't die for nothing." And there's the glasses guy who hacks into the code system in Quadrant 4, and somehow she's able to memorize the code, which is weird. It's like 4 digits. It's just a PIN number. But he dies. And then they are going to make their way. They also get to, what's the name of Jim Brown. Jim Brown shows up, and Jim Brown is interesting because Jim Brown, Jim Brown showed up in this book, Chaos, where at the beginning, Tom O'Neill is interviewing one of the guys who knew Terry Melcher and Roman Polanski, and is talking about the ORGIES that were at Roman Polanski's house at Cielo Drive, and the guy says that, oh no, you know who it is? He knows James Toback, and James Toback says that he showed up with Jim Brown and that they were hoping to be part of this, nasty, whatever they were doing there, the shenanigans. James Toback is the guy who directed Two Girls and a Guy with Robert Downey Jr., and he's the guy that I met at. A friend of mine was supposed to be in a movie with him, and she asked me to go with her to see one of his movies, and he was there because he wanted to meet with her, and she asked me to go with her because she thought that he was a creep. So she wanted me to, I'll say alleged, right? And she wanted me to go with him, and I met him there. And then she was not in the movie. So that's all I'll say about that. But anyway, because whatever. I was there for my girl, but I didn't do much. But anyway, whatever. But he's in that book, Chaos. And so anyway, so that's weird. So anyway, Jim Brown is in the film. And he's the flamethrower guy, and he comes out, and then he gets, I don't know, I'm skipping over a lot here. He was cool in Mars Attacks, yeah. He's got his weird, white hair. But the best part of the movie really is the guy that we haven't talked about yet, which is Captain Freedom. Ooh. Ha, ha. Remember, no pain, no gain. Ha, ha. So Jessie Ventura, no pain, no gain, Yeah, he plays Fireball. So Jessie Ventura is in this as Captain Freedom, and he's the ultimate. And he never gets to fight Arnie because they also fight the Wagner guy. What's the name of the Wagner guy who sings the Dynamo? Dynamo's awesome in this movie because he's in like an electric dune buggy again, and he's just riding along, and his car flips over, and Arnie's gonna kill him. He's gonna pike him, and he says, "How could I kill anyone so helpless? He's a human being." And that's when people really know that this guy couldn't be the butcher of Bakersfield, even though they go, "Boo, kill him," And he's, "Oh!" Right? He's like singing Wagner, and he's got his light up mohawk. That guy was. I always thought that was the funniest part when I was a kid. So anyway, then we get they escape into a Christmas tree, and Arnie and Maria Conchita Alonso disappear into Quadrant 4, and they meet with the Revolution, the underground people who were there. I mean, it's like, dude, you could have just stuck with them this whole time. I guess then the revolution wouldn't happen because then they wouldn't have the impetus to do the revolution because of his winning the Hunger Games Running Man on television. But Maria Conchita Alonso, I like saying her name. They hack into the system, and she puts in the real footage. Right, Richard Killian has been lying to you. Right, vaporwave on the screen, and she hacks into it and plays the raw footage where he says he's not going to kill the people. So obviously, it was a propaganda psyop, and they did massacre all the people at the food riots at the Harvest Festival, but he didn't do it. So now he's the hero. And they break in, and they've got all their Austrian, machine guns. And he makes good on his promise that Killian, I'll be back. Right? Only in the reruns, baby. He goes. Only in the reruns, which is actually a really good comeback. You never think of that when you hear the "I'll be back" only in reruns, baby. It's actually a pretty good comeback. But later on, remember in the film, he does a direct link to Arnie down there in the Gladio caves, the Gladio Mad Max caves, and he says to him, "Hey, yo, listen, we can offer you beachfront condo, exclusive contract. You'll be a celebrity. You get paid standard fee." Dawson gets his call from Secretary of State or, whatever. He's constantly talking to the Justice Department and the Attorney General, and they offer him amnesty. And he essentially says, "I'll be back and I'm going to stick my fist down your throat." And then he smashes the camera. And he makes good on this, and he destroys him at the end, and they win the revolution. So that's the Running Man, essentially. But this is interesting because going back to our original theme, this was the theme of The Most Dangerous Game, right? We get somebody who flips and who they offer the contract, they offer the thing, but he doesn't take it, right? They say, "Do you want to be a fellow, most dangerous game hunter?" And he says, "No," right? He tells them that from the beginning, and then he becomes the predator because Arnold Schwarzenegger is literally the predator in the movie The Predator, but he's also the predator in terms of he's in the helicopter hunting people. He's part of their system. And then he becomes the prey until he becomes the predator again. So it flips, right? Also, the wilderness of the most dangerous game just gets, transfused into an urban hellscape island, essentially. I mean, just like in the Hunger Games where they're taken to a synthetic world, this is a sort of analog synthetic world where they're just in tubes far underground in the death tunnels. But they have to make their way back to civilization. And then, of course, just like in Hunger Games, the long saga, they're going to go on to lead the revolution to fix society. But it's interesting because we always get this. We get the humans hunting other humans, and that serves as bread and circuses, the gladiatorial arena, sports ball with humans. Death is the price. Everybody in the studio audience we assume that they assume this is real and they're dead, and they really feel for instance, when Buzzsaw, gets killed on camera, they don't want to see their hero gone, right? But then they learn who the real heroes are. But we also get, the FEDS, we get the PSYOPs, we get 1984 world, we get the FEMA zone, we get the Outlands, we get Mad Max world. And it's interesting that, the same Predator is essentially in many ways like the same story as The Most Dangerous Game as The Running Man. It's different, and it's a great film, obviously. Clontar says BLA, also Hard Target with Van Damme, has this theme. Yeah, good point. Is Hard Target the one where he has a mullet? I like Van Damme. I've always liked Van Damme. Of course, we did our Steven Seagal stream. You guys go back and watch our Steven Seagal stream where we did all those Steven Seagal films. Maybe we need to do one for Van Damme. Hey, listen, if anybody wants to sponsor a stream on Van Damme, you can drop me a fat chat, $100, and I will do a Van Damme super stream analysis of Time Cop, Universal Soldier, Lionheart, Kickboxer, and what's the one? What's his film? The one where he plays his own twin. Bloodsport. Bloodsport has a great soundtrack. What's the one where he's dancing? Is that Bloodsport? And then what's the one where he put what's the one where he has the twin? Double Impact. Thank you. Yeah, somebody, if you want me to do a sponsor stream on that, drop me that through PayPal, and I will do that for sure. If you want to see me do that. That's I like Van Damme, and I like his skills. He's got skills. I always liked Van Damme. I think he's cool. So anyway, that is The Running Man. We need to do a Predator analysis at some point. If you go to my Instagram, please make sure you subscribe to my Instagram, Bazed Analyzer at Instagram, because on Instagram I recently posted my brief synopsis of Predator, and I thought I would just read you. I've read the brief chapter 1 of Monarch, the book that I'm writing, which begins with. I'll read you the epigraphs first, and then we'll shut it down here. We do it live, and then we'll shut it down. We're almost at 3 hours, so I'm going to just end with this because this is Monarch, and this is my book that I'm writing. So the epigraph is from Julius Caesar. Brutus says, "No, Cassius, for the eye sees not itself, but by reflection, by some other things." Cassius says, "'Tis just, and it is very much lamented, Brutus, that you have no such mirrors as will turn your hidden worthiness into your eye, that you might see your shadow." It's from Act 1, Scene 2, lines 144 through 151 of Julius Caesar. And then, of course, Jim Morrison, "Lost in a Roman wilderness of pain." So I've read you chapter 1. I don't remember what stream it was, but you'll have to go back and see that. I will read you the end of that section, and then I'll read you some of chapter 2, which is pretty brief, because this is The Most Dangerous Game, but with CIA, MK Delta, Monarch. Okay, so listen, if the language is a bit much or the imagery is a bit much, I'm going to try not to edit this. I might have to, but this is my own writing, And you know what I wrote down here? I wrote down a section from Apocalypse Now, not as part of the book, but you don't talk to the Colonel, man. You listen to him. He reads poetry out loud, man. And a voice. No, he's got plans for you, man. Where is he? He's gone, man. He's gone out with his people. He forgets himself with his people. He forgets himself. Which does play into this. Okay, so it's part of section 2 of chapter 1. I crouch under this frond and feel warm in its wing. Everything settles. Breeze between leaves. Sound amongst the water. It ripples with water bugs in the starlight now. Glint, flutter, then beaming. The voice I hear. The voice. That's where I got it. A tone. That is a whisper, straight-edged, into itself, into a mic, a radio low-leveled with the frequency of cryptic text, almost unfuzzed. The breeze carries it to me downwind. I accept it like breath. A water moccasin glides over my foot in the mud, mazing through my toes, fangs sheathed in a quiet skull. I move around sound. I semicircle through an everglade. That voice aims a rifle. I feel its confidence breathing down a scope. When I submerge, the current moves me across a black bottom. I rise behind a shadow and cast no shadow. I am a quick wave. My right hand grips the gape and entombs the mouth, and I grip the left calf blade with my left hand. I release its polish and sheath it again in the rib cage. Dark breath on my torso of a punctured lung. I bring him down into the quiet water and bring the blade to rest under the chin and feel the expiration. I push you down into the bottom with love. I release you to your abyss. Face down, you will float to your cage. Fall forever. I rise. All right, chapter 2, and this is I wrote this. Okay, so I'm not saying these things; they are written just for the sake of the system here, paying attention to the transcript. Okay. And I'm not going to analyze it because it's my own writing. I'm just going to read it. Okay. There were others like me. I remember there were others, and I want to help them. But first, I want to find the other hunters. That's what they were, hunters. We are the hunted. I was naked. I felt naked, and I was ashamed. I also felt free. I knelt into the mire beside the glade. The mud was thick, black, and I dipped my fingers into the blackness and whipped it into a small pool. I ran my fingers under my eyes and across my face. I could see my face in a still pool beside the bog as the stars shined their spears across my complexion. That's Blakean. I am a mirror for your mind. You will see your own face, and I will obliterate your psyche. I roll my body into the mud, feel the cool texture cake my skin in black. I roll my right arm in grass one time to break up the thickness. No patterns, all chaos. I move through the sawgrass. Movement increases my coat. I don't allow it to cake and dry. I must make my next kill while still cool, languid, and fluid. Do you get it that the character here, the speaker, is a monarch? This is a teen monarch who finds himself in the most dangerous game, being hunted. I sense the next one over there up the oak tree sitting in a tree stand. He's looking for me like a deer, but I am no deer. I'm a black wolf who smells his breath, acrid, dry, puncturing the night in short bursts. He thinks he controls it. I look through his eyes and see nothing, but from here I see red. The lip skin catches his breathing, making tiny shards of dry sound. I zero in and stalk round the circumference of his scope. I can move without a single leaf announcing my footfall, not slowly, carefully, but like quicksilver, liquid through wet reeds. I scale a ginkgo tree parallel to his 3 o'clock. He's focused through his scope at 11. The breeze never lies. It announces itself there, fully exhaling for me. I leap to a lower branch with perfect control. This branch is my bicep. It doesn't move because it is me and I control it. I swing round to his arbor throne behind him and breathe onto his neck. No hair, just white skin. Time ices over for him. He feels me. He knows his fate, but he can't come to grips with it. I grip him with my words. I want him to know what this means. Your children will know who you are. He turns his head slowly, so slowly he never wants to know what's there at the other side until his periphery becomes his reality, his ultimate reality. Everything he ever lived for and wanted has climaxed now at this moment, and I see myself in his eyes, and my teeth expand like star glints that pierce his soul, and I stuff his grenade into his mouth and close my teeth around his nose. I bite down with the force of a million wolves and tear it off and pluck its bulb back out with my fingers and shove it into his eye mass while I pull the pin and leap into a hole in the dark and roll away into the fen. His head explodes and rains blood in a beautiful shower of thick skull, marking that tree where his body falls to the ground and straight into the abyss. I move like a hovering angel next to the hit. So that's chapter 2. So the beginning of the book, the character has the speaker is psychic fractured. He wakes up. He's a teen, and he wakes up, and there are others like him who are out there. This is like Kathy O'Brien. He wakes up, and I don't want to explain it too much, but, because of what the words I just read, but wakes up, and they know they're being hunted, and this is a test, and that they're being hunted by these, by men. And so he has to survive, and he remembers what he's been put through in terms of the actions that he's going through here, and he's going to eliminate all of them. So that's it. So that's all I want to read of that. That's just the end of part 1 and chapter 2 of Monarch. And I only thought I would read that because it ties into it's the most dangerous game. It's the most dangerous game, Predator, all those things thrown into it. So there's a lot more. So if you want to support me and help me to be able to write the book with time on my hands, then please think about supporting me. Please see the links in the chat, in the description, in the channel description, in the video description. And don't forget, you can support me anytime. You can also get me to do a sponsored stream. And listen, one more time, all the sponsor streams that people have sponsored, I haven't forgotten about you. They're all coming up. There's just been a lot going on, and there's infinite books, right? So I still need to do so much. I still need to do the sagas and the Decameron and Ben Franklin, and maybe Gone with the Wind was part of it. There's music lyrics, there's film analyses that I have to do. There's a whole list of things. But if you want to be in that list, please think about supporting me with a sponsored stream, $100 for a book. And that is, that's, look, the last stream, I don't think about this in terms of time, but I did that last stream that I did, watch 9 hours of movies and do about 9 hours of reading books to prepare for it. So it's worth time. That is, if you want to. You don't have to. You can also support me by liking and sharing the stream. You can send this to your friends and family. Get them to. It's really hard for people to hit that subscribe button, but help me to get the subs up. And thank you for everybody who's been in the chat tonight. Really appreciate you. Thanks for all of my homies out there. And let me just check one more time, see if we have any more. If we have any more super chats. Let me check on YouTube here. I don't think we have any YouTube super chats, but that's okay. Let's check Dono Chat. Lots of great Dono Chat support tonight. Really appreciate y'all. So again, yes, shouts out to DJ out there, Dayjire, who sends $5 and says, "Have you seen Surviving the Game with Ice-T?" Yes, I have. I saw it in 1992. I think it was 1992 with my best friend Taylor. We went to go see it, and we thought that's one of the movies I saw when I was 12, and I thought it was the coolest movie of all time. It's great. And yes, it's a great. That's a great Most Dangerous Game film. And again, shouts out to First Person Q, KF, Kira, Bon Jovi, 1912, Tommy Jones, Sabrina Fair, and Moldy Apple for all your support. Shouts out to Jason out there. Also, shouts out to Jeb out there who drops $5 on Venmo. Really appreciate you. He says, "Dono." Thank you so much, Jeb. Really appreciate you. Shouts out to Jason. Shouts out to Maddie Gersh, my great friend out there. Let's see. If I've forgotten you, or if I'm, shouts out to John. Oh yeah, big time. We got to give a special shouts out to my homeboy out there, the real John Connor, who dropped $15 on Cash App. Thank you for your support, my homeboy. I love you. And Shouts out to Dana out there who supported me. And John Connor sent $20 before. I don't think I gave him a shout out for that. Shouts out to Andrea for that $10 on PayPal. Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate you. Please go and make sure that you watch my last stream, that Paul Thomas Anderson Masterclass film stream. Go back and watch my old streams. Check out the Jarhead stream. Check out some of the ones that we mentioned in this. King Lear, The Road. I don't know. We mentioned a bunch throughout this. And please go. And thanks everybody who watched me and Rachel on Base Homeschool Mom's channel. I'll be back soon with, I think the next thing I'm doing, I'm working on this book right now. This is Chaos, Tom O'Neill's Chaos. This is about Chaz Manson. Hey, Charlie, man. Hey, Charlie, man. Well, my mother's Eisenhower and my father's an icebox. It's going to be far out, man. So we're going to probably do this. We've also got The Island of Dr. Moreau coming up. And we've got Jamie stream with Peter Pan coming up. We got a whole bunch of stuff. So I think that's going to be it for tonight. Thank you, everybody who was here. Really appreciate you. And one more time, please make sure that you go and check out our friend Rooks G. And make sure that you listen to his music, because he is our homeboy and he makes great music. Rooks G over on YouTube, SoundCloud, Instagram. He makes dope music, makes great breaks. So let's finish up here. Let's finish up one more time with Omega X, because this is his latest single. So shouts out to Rooks G and shouts out to iPack Arts for the thumbnails that he does for us. And that's about it, you guys. I love y'all. I hope you have a great night and a great rest of your week. And we go strong into September. Let's go in strong, supporting each other, supporting our friends, saying hello to friends and family, loving each other, praising God. Shouts out to Dana, who drops me $5, says fire streams. Thank you so much, Dana. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Love y'all out there. And I will see you soon. To play us out, here's Rooks G and a cut off his new album.
Styles, can I ask you something? Do you really like working on Kane stuff?
You really like busting people?
Yeah. I bust frauds, I bust phonies. I love it.
Have you ever busted anyone you know?
Yeah, sure I did. Doesn't make any difference. See,
Peace, y'all.
in my business, you soon find out that anybody's capable of anything. Think of it, they've done it.
Doesn't leave you much to believe in.
Yeah, but think of the upside. It doesn't leave you too much to be disappointed in either. Believe me, the sooner we're off the planet, the better.
Now you sound like Kane. You really like busting people?
I bust frauds, I bust phonies. I love it. In my business, you soon find out that anybody's capable of anything. You think of it, they've done it.
Here's Rooks G and Omega X. That's how we're going to finish it up. We'll finish up hard here. Yo, bonus if you're still sticking around. Rooks G, Omega X.